Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marty Hill. Marty Hill, 42, lives in a cozy little town called Prairie Village, Kansas, USA. She is energetic, cheerful, and kind. From a young age, she was drawn to fine art, dreaming of becoming an artist or designer. To pursue this dream, she worked hard, completed her studies, and gained the necessary educational background. Eventually, she fulfilled her dream by working in the design studio of a clothing company. At the company, Marty is always highly regarded for his outstanding achievements and reliability. So, when she failed to show up for work on September 8, 2010, without any notice, everyone immediately suspected that something was wrong. No one knew what had happened, and she had not requested any leave. Initially, her colleagues hoped she might just be running late. They tried calling her but received no response and decided to wait a little longer. An important meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and Marty's attendance was deemed essential. Her absence worried everyone since she was always responsible and fully aware of the meeting's importance. She is usually deeply involved with the group and consistently reports any issues, so her silence in this case is unusual. Growing increasingly uneasy, one of her friends tried calling her repeatedly, but the calls went unanswered. Overcome with fear, the friend began to break down in tears, sensing deep in her heart that something terrible might have happened to Marty. A friend decided to find out what had happened to Marty. One of her colleagues offered to visit her house and check on her. He arrived at her quiet residential neighborhood at 11:30 a.m. and knocked on her door, but there was no answer. This seemed odd, especially since her car was parked in the driveway, suggesting she should have been home. He walked around the house but saw nothing unusual, although he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The unsettling silence made him uneasy, so he returned to his car. The colleague returned to the office and discussed the situation with the others. They decided it was necessary to call the police to check on Marty. Because Marty had a 15-year-old daughter who was at school at the time, they agreed not to alarm her until they obtained more information about Marty's whereabouts. Eventually, the police were contacted, and the colleague stayed near Marty's driveway, waiting for the police to arrive. The police arrived at the scene within minutes. When the officer knocked on the door, there was no response, and there were no signs of forced entry. Looking through a window, he noticed a woman's purse sitting on the kitchen table, which indicated that Marty should have been inside. Concerned, the officer decided to check the door, suspecting she might be unwell and in need of help. To his surprise, the door was unlocked. The officer entered the house and searched the first and second floors but found nothing out of the ordinary. He then proceeded to check the basement. Using a flashlight, the officer realized there were no lights in the basement. As he descended to the very bottom, he spotted someone lying in a large pool of blood, curled up in a fetal position. The dim light revealed a gruesome scene. The room was splattered with so much blood that it resembled a torture chamber. At first, the police thought the victim was a man due to the large amount of blood, but upon closer inspection, they couldn't even determine the victim's gender. Based on the scene, they concluded that the person was dead. However, to their horror, the victim suddenly turned around and looked directly at them. The police discovered a severe wound on the victim's throat and observed that her face was so swollen, disfigured it resembled a gruesome, bloody mess. Believing the victim was on the verge of death, an officer leaned in and repeatedly asked, "Who did this?" Despite his efforts, the victim struggled to breathe and was unable to speak. Prior to questioning, the officer had already called for medical assistance. Though still alive, the victim was unable to reveal the identity of her attacker. The victim was rushed to the nearest hospital due to her critical condition, which made identifying her difficult. Her injuries were concentrated on her head and face, including multiple skull fractures, facial fractures, a concussion, and cerebral swelling. The wound was particularly devastating, slicing through muscles and vital blood vessels. Medical experts estimated her chances of survival at no more than 20%. Finally, the victim was identified to be Marty Hill, the owner of the home. Against all odds, the doctors managed to save her life. Attention immediately turned to her teenage daughter, Mackenzie, who was contacted right away. Mackenzie was in complete shock and had no idea what had transpired at their home. Upon hearing of the brutal attack, family members rushed to the hospital to be with Marty. The extent of her suffering was unimaginable, and her injuries were so severe that even her own mother didn't recognize her. Unfortunately, the doctors all gave the same grim prognosis regarding her chances of survival. Her condition was serious, but at least it was somewhat manageable. Family members took turns staying by her bedside every day. The situation was so overwhelming that they felt a mix of anger and helplessness. Her son, Stephen, felt the most anger. Living in Texas at the time, he returned home to be with his mother and offer his support. Stephen was the first person to enter the basement where his mother had been found. After the forensic investigator examined the house, they emerged from the basement and strictly prohibited anyone else from entering due to the gruesome nature of the scene. While the relatives grieved, Stephen cleaned up the blood himself. Detectives investigating the tragedy were baffled, unable to determine who could have committed such an act or why. Marty's family and friends were equally perplexed, as no one could imagine her having an enemy capable of such violence. Investigators searched for clues in her personal life, workplace, and relationships with her children but found nothing unusual. The crime was determined to be unrelated to abuse, as Marty's clothes remained intact, a conclusion later confirmed by the Armed Forces analysis. There was no indication of theft, nothing was missing, and the house showed no signs of forced entry. The circumstances of the crime were shrouded in mystery. Even Marty herself was unable to provide any information about the identity of her attacker. The police interviewed Marty's neighbors, but none of them were able to provide any significant information. The only clue reported was a sighting of a red, broken pickup truck near Marty's house at around 8 a.m., driven by a young, light-skinned, short man. This timing aligned with the approximate time of the attack determined by detectives. The officers followed up by visiting the sewing company where Marty worked to interview her colleagues, hoping to identify someone matching the description of the driver. However, this lead turned into another dead end, as none of her co-workers could offer useful information or suggest who might have been driving the pickup truck. Detectives then shifted their focus to Marty's family. They spoke with Marty's mother, Shirley Roth, who provided a potentially valuable lead. Shirley revealed that her daughter had not been romantically involved with anyone since divorcing her ex-husband 7 years earlier. Despite their divorce, they maintained regular contact because they shared custody of their daughter. Shirley explained that, following the divorce, Marty had dedicated herself entirely to her work and children and had shown no interest in dating. In Shirley's opinion, the only person who seemed like a potential suspect was Marty's ex-husband. This lead warranted further investigation, especially since Marty remained unconscious and unable to provide information herself. Detectives continued to speak with family members to identify Marty's ex-husband. Their children were quick to defend their father. Their daughter, Mackenzie, a high school student, took offense at the suggestion that her father could be a suspect. She asserted that her father could not have done such a thing, describing him as calm, non-confrontational, and someone who maintained a good relationship with his ex-wife and children. Their son, Stephen, also rejected the suspicion, stating that his father was incapable of committing the crime. Despite this, detectives could not dismiss the theory and decided to investigate it thoroughly. The police then visited Marty's ex-husband at his home. He was fully cooperative, invited them inside, and answered their questions openly. He appeared deeply affected by the incident, expressing that he still cared for Marty and was distressed by what had happened. He expressed relief that she had survived and shared that he was praying for her recovery. Although there was nothing initially suspicious, the police still needed to verify his alibi. He told them that, on the morning of the attack, he had taken his daughter to school before going to work. To confirm his statement, the police spoke with his daughter, Mackenzie, who was living with her grandmother, while they worked on verifying the details he had provided. A DNA sample was taken from him, though analysis would require time. For Mackenzie, the prohibition against seeing her father created additional hardship, making this a challenging period for everyone involved. The police also collected DNA samples from under Marty's nails, along with hair follicles found on her clothing. After comparing this evidence with the ex-husband's DNA, all suspicions about him were completely dismissed. His DNA did not match, and his alibi was verified. As a result, the ex-husband was officially cleared from the list of suspects, much to Mackenzie's relief. The family was finally able to reconnect and support one another as they waited for Marty to regain consciousness. Meanwhile, Marty's family tried to piece together what had happened and figure out who might have attacked her. Her mother, Shirley, recalled that not long before the incident, the grandmother's house had been broken into and robbed. This raised fears that the entire family could be targeted by a stalker intent on carrying out violent acts. However, the police had no definite answers, leaving the family engulfed in fear and paranoia. They had no clue who the perpetrator could be and clung to hope that Marty would recover and reveal what had truly happened. The family also recalled that, shortly before the attack, a handyman had visited Marty's house to change the locks. This handyman worked for B&J Construction, a company her mother and grandmother had trusted and hired for years. Coincidentally, he was the only unfamiliar person who had interacted with Marty in recent months. This raised suspicions that the handyman, who often did repair work for the family, might be connected to both the robbery and the assault. The police turned their attention to Brian Pennington, the handyman who had regularly visited Marty's house, her mother's house, and her grandmother's house to handle household repairs and maintenance. At the time, Brian was 26 years old, married, and the father of 2 children. He lived about an hour and a half away in a small town called Leeton, Missouri, with a population of around 500. On September 10, 2010, detectives decided to visit Brian's home. When they arrived, they immediately noticed a broken red pickup truck in the driveway, which matched a description provided by neighbors of a suspicious vehicle. However, the truck did not have license plates, so they were unable to confirm the match. Inside the house, they found Brian, who was cooperative and permitted the officers to enter his kitchen. He answered their questions openly. When asked about the truck, Brian explained that he didn't drive it because it had no license plates. He also mentioned that his last visit to Marty's house had been 3 to 4 days before the attack, during which he had checked the basement equipment. Brian didn't contact the police after seeing on the news that Marty had been attacked. He explained that he didn't know anything and couldn't provide any useful information about the case. Brian wasn't very familiar with Marty. Their interactions had been limited to working together on repairing her house. Although he considered her a respectable woman, that was all he could share with the authorities. However, detectives began to question his account. Their suspicions were triggered by the fresh scratches on his face, which might have been caused during a confrontation with Marty. When asked about these marks, he explained that they were caused by a dog that had scratched him while he was playing in the yard the day before the detectives came to visit. He acted fearful when accused of being involved in the crime, insisting that he was incapable of such an act. Brian provided an alibi, prompting investigators to verify his story. When detectives spoke to Brian's wife, Jessica, they noticed her odd behavior from the outset. She appeared hesitant, seemed afraid to disclose the truth, dodged direct questions, and mentioned there had been tension in their relationship lately. Jessica stated that her husband had been at home that morning, sleeping in another room, and added that the last time he had worked at Marty's house was about a month earlier. She also corroborated Brian's claim that the scratches on his face were caused by a dog. However, her demeanor suggested she was not being truthful. Detectives doubted her account, and she was taken to the station for further questioning. Authorities suspected Jessica might either be an accomplice to the crime or trying to shield the killer. Before leaving Brian's house, the police asked him whether they would find anything suspicious if they searched the property. Brian confidently stated that they wouldn't find anything and even agreed to let them look around. However, in the laundry basket, at the very bottom, they discovered a pair of jeans with suspicious stains. Brian explained that the stains weren't blood but merely machine oil left over from working on a pickup truck. He allowed the police to take the jeans for testing and voluntarily provided his DNA samples for comparison. The items were immediately sent to the forensic lab, where tests confirmed the stains were blood, not oil. However, additional time was needed to extract the DNA profile and compare it. While detectives awaited the test results, Marty regained consciousness in the hospital 12 days after the attack. Although she was able to communicate shortly thereafter, her initial days out of unconsciousness were clouded by confusion. During this time, she experienced constant pain and discomfort. It's not surprising that Marty needed to take a large number of medications during her recovery. Her poor health may have stemmed from her reliance on these drugs, in addition to the severe injuries she suffered. Despite the extensive brain damage she endured, her memory remained largely intact. Marty informed the police that Brian Pennington was the one who had attacked her. She described that morning's incident as starting entirely normally. She woke up early, got ready for work, and followed her usual routine. Around 7:30 a.m., she heard a car stop in front of her house but didn't pay it much attention. Soon after, there was a knock at the door. It was Brian, who had worked on her house about a month earlier. Marty found his visit odd from the beginning. It was unplanned and too early in the morning. However, she reassured herself, thinking he might have been working nearby or had forgotten a tool during his last visit. Although she was hesitant to open the door, she ultimately decided to do so. The two had a brief conversation. Brian was polite and friendly, which helped ease her concerns. Brian explained that he had heard Marty was planning to sell her house and wanted to alert her to a problem he had noticed during the previous renovation. He insisted it was important and offered to show her the issue in the basement. Curiosity overcame her, and she agreed to follow him downstairs. She recounted that everything happened very quickly. Initially, they were just walking downstairs, but an unsettling feeling suddenly came over her. Brian grabbed her and pushed her down the stairs, causing her head to hit hard against the concrete floor. Brian violently attacked Marty, choking her until she lost consciousness. Later, Marty explained that her memories of the incident were hazy, as though she were trapped in a fog. She occasionally regained consciousness, only to lose it again shortly afterward. Eventually, a policeman arrived at her home, and she was taken to the hospital. Investigators needed evidence to support Marty's account. Tests were conducted on a pair of jeans found in Brian's laundry basket, which revealed traces of Marty's blood. DNA samples taken from beneath her fingernails also matched his DNA. Law enforcement officers obtained an arrest warrant for Brian and visited his home, but he was not there. The search for him intensified, and soon police in the city discovered a damaged red pickup truck. Jessica was behind the wheel, and Brian was sitting in the passenger seat, visibly disheveled. Authorities charged Brian with attempted murder and robbery, setting bail at $1 million. The news stunned Marty's mother and grandmother, who had been in contact with Brian for years and trusted him as a professional handyman. Brian frequently worked for Marty's family, completing various household repairs. Tragically, it was Marty's mother who had recommended him to her daughter, leaving her with a deep sense of guilt. The family struggled to comprehend this senseless act of aggression. Brian's cruelty seemed inexplicable, and no clear motive emerged. Although he provided no explanation for his actions, experts were left baffled by the sheer brutality of the attack. Doctors were amazed that Marty had survived at all. Brian's violence extended far beyond simply choking Marty into unconsciousness. He threw her down a staircase, causing her to land headfirst on a concrete floor, fracturing her skull. He continued his attack relentlessly, beating her and slashing her throat. Marty struggled to comprehend what she could have done to warrant such a terrible fate. After sustaining severe head injuries, she faced challenges with her balance, although she eventually managed to walk independently. Shortly after emerging from a coma, she developed visual impairments, along with hearing and cognitive difficulties. Her family noticed that Marty seemed like a shadow of her former self, but they remained hopeful for her recovery. At times, she would lapse into long periods of thoughtfulness, which deeply concerned her loved ones, especially her daughter. Doctors refrained from making a definitive prognosis. While acknowledging the challenges Marty faced, they emphasized that her survival against the odds suggested that recovery was possible. After spending about a month in the hospital, Marty was finally discharged. During her recovery period, she became closer to her 16-year-old daughter, Mackenzie, whose birthday occurred while she was still in the hospital. Mackenzie was deeply touched by a card her mother wrote for her, even though the handwriting resembled that of a child. She recognized the long journey ahead and understood her vital role in supporting her mother as she gradually healed. Marty faced significant emotional challenges after the attack, struggling to reconcile how someone she had trusted deeply could turn out to be a vicious criminal capable of unprovoked violence. Seeking solace, she turned to her local church for emotional support. Meanwhile, Marty's family was determined to ensure that Brian faced justice and received a lengthy prison sentence. The prosecutor's office had overwhelming evidence to press charges against him, including physical proof, Marty's detailed account of the attack, scratches on Brian's face, DNA matches, and items stained with blood. The only missing piece was a clear motive. Brian had neither attempted to abuse Marty nor stolen anything from her home. His actions were simply a deliberate and calculated effort to kill her while working in her house. This act of violence was sudden and seemed to lack any apparent provocation. Marty had no prior conflicts with Brian, and relations between him and other women in her family had been peaceful. However, as police investigated Brian's background, they uncovered a troubling history of criminal activity. He had been convicted in 26 separate cases, most of which were related to domestic violence. His ex-wife and former girlfriends had reported him to the police numerous times. Jessica admitted that she had shielded him out of fear of becoming his next target, as his behavior was systematically abusive. Brian frequently threatened her, exhibiting a clear pattern of cruelty. Jessica testified for the prosecution during the trial, stating that Brian was not home on the night of the attack. She explained that he had been away for hours and only returned around noon, after Marty was assaulted. Upon his return, his clothes were covered in blood. When questioned, he claimed it was machine oil but offered no further explanation. Jessica also refuted his claim that the scratches were allegedly caused by the dog, revealing that he had forced her to lie under the threat of being killed. She provided detailed accounts of their married life, describing him as abusive, both physically and emotionally. During the trial, Brian was visibly shocked when Marty appeared alive in court to testify against him. Jessica, his wife, also testified for the prosecution, presenting evidence that contradicted his statements. Moreover, none of Brian's claims were corroborated during the hearings. Jessica submitted cell phone records showing that, at approximately 8 a.m. on the morning of the attack, she had tried to contact Brian. Geolocation data confirmed that he was near Marty's house at the time. As the evidence against Brian continues to build, he has no viable path to acquittal. To avoid a prolonged and traumatic trial, Brian was offered a plea bargain. Although he could have faced up to 40 years in prison, the deal reduced his sentence to 28 years. However, on the day his sentence was to be announced, Brian unexpectedly attempted to withdraw the plea agreement and plead guilty instead. The court rejected his request, citing no valid justification for accepting it. During the final courtroom proceedings, Marty directly asked Brian why he had attacked her and nearly killed her, but he refused to provide a reason or make any closing statements. Marty is still recovering from the devastating attack, which left permanent scars on her face and neck. The injuries have distorted her facial features and affected her mobility. Despite these challenges, Marty remains determined and continues to train rigorously, believing she can regain her former self or even surpass it. In interviews, she often reflects on how someone only 26 years old could commit such a cruel act. Her resilience and self-belief have helped her heal from this violent incident, strengthening her resolve in the process. Marty returned to her routine fairly quickly and has become even more active. She took up kickboxing to learn self-defense, and sports have played a significant role in her recovery. She also created a website aimed at supporting others who have experienced traumatic events, using her personal story to inspire and encourage healing. In addition to these efforts, Marty continues to work as a designer for a clothing company, channeling her creativity into her art as a way to manage anxiety and stress. She credits her daughter, Mackenzie, as the cornerstone of her recovery and is deeply grateful for her unwavering support. Recently, Marty published a book that details the horrific incident that changed her life, with the hope of inspiring others to overcome adversity through resilience. She now actively works as a motivational speaker, meeting with various communities and offering the same support that helped her rebuild her life. As for Brian Pennington, her attacker, he remains in prison and is estranged from his family, including his mother, ex-wife, and children, who have all cut ties with him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Doss. Amanda Doss was born in 1976 in Moscow, Oklahoma, USA. Moscow is a small, typical town with a peaceful atmosphere, not many special attractions, and a very low crime rate. For this reason, the town is mainly inhabited by families with children. However, Amanda felt that Moscow was not suitable for her, so she moved away at a young age. She later settled in Redwater, Texas, a suburb of about 800 residents. During her time in Redwater, Amanda began a relationship and got married. The couple had their first child, a daughter named Guinevere, in August 1999. Family members affectionately called her Gwen. She was a lovely and calm child who grew up to be an active and thoughtful young woman. While attending Redwater High School, Guinevere was known for her thoughtful and responsible nature, which was evident in everything she did. At the age of 9, she donated all her Christmas money and toys to an orphanage, repeating this act of generosity on her next birthday. For years after the birth of her first child, Amanda gave birth to her second child, a boy named Texas, in May 2003. Texas was like his sister in many ways and loved helping others, so he became a Boy Scout when he started school. The two sisters were very close and love each other to the neighbors. Amanda's family represented a typical American family. To the neighbors, Amanda's family represented a typical American family. Unfortunately, a few years before these events, the couple divorced. The children stayed with their mother, who worked hard to provide for their education and needs. During this time, a teenage nanny named Rachel Pittman, 16, assisted Amanda in caring for the children. May 11, 2011, seemed like a normal day for the family. Amanda, 40, was divorced and living with her children in a cozy house in a quiet suburb. The plan was to have dinner together and watch TV before going to bed. The day proceeded normally and peacefully, with the children going to bed after family time. At 3 a.m., Amanda's parents were startled by a distressing phone call from their granddaughter, Guinevere. They later tearfully recounted the call as chaotic and confusing. Guinevere was screaming incoherently, with loud noises in the background, then screaming and crying before the call was disconnected. Unable to reach Amanda or the children, the worried grandparents drove to their daughter's house. Their concern grew when they saw flames coming from the house a few blocks away. Fearing that Amanda and the children were still inside, they left the car in the driveway and, without hesitation, rushed into the burning building. They found Guinevere lying unconscious on the living room floor. They dragged her out into the street, but Guinevere showed no signs of life. Amanda's parents were unable to do anything because they were badly injured and burned. They called for help. The grandparents were distraught and worried about the fate of their daughter and grandchildren when firefighters arrived on the scene. Rescue teams and doctors treated Amanda's parents before taking them to hospital with severe burns. Firefighters battled the fire for hours, and it was not until dawn that they were able to extinguish the flames, which had destroyed most of the house. Unfortunately, the fire also destroyed much of the evidence. It is important to understand what caused the fire and what happened in the house that night. After extinguishing the fire, firefighters examined the remaining hot spots. Initially, it was believed that an electrical fault may have caused the fire. However, the discovery of the remains of other family members revealed the more sinister cause. Amanda, 11-year-old Guinevere, and 8-year-old Texas had been brutally stabbed to death before the fire started. This was confirmed by the medical examiner, who found no soot in their airways. Reinforcements arrived on the scene and police began a murder investigation. They also inspected the burned house. The condition of the victims suggested that the fire started from Amanda's body. The attacker may have used a flammable substance to light the fire and spray it on the furniture, walls, and floors. This was confirmed by a forensic scientist. It was impossible to sift through every inch of the ashes for evidence. It was clear that no electrical equipment was involved. The fire was set intentionally, likely to destroy evidence of the triple homicide. The police quickly reached out to the public through the media, offering a $40,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest of the criminal who brutally murdered a mother and her 2 children. The public was shocked by the news of the murder of the small family. Amanda, a sweet and kind woman. The police questioned Amanda's neighbors and relatives to find a motive for the crime, but no useful information was forthcoming. Over the next few weeks, dozens of calls came in from random witnesses hoping to earn a large reward. However, no information was provided that would advance the investigation. In the 4th week, they received an anonymous call. For security reasons, the caller's name was not included in the investigation file. The caller claimed that a 17-year-old friend named Rachel Pittman was responsible for the family's murders. It was initially unclear why the caller was so confident and suspicious of Rachel, but she had provided important information that only the police knew at the time. As a result, the police took her claims seriously and followed up on the lead. The situation was further complicated by the fact that the caller was from California, far from the crime scene in Texas. This raised questions about how she could have known about the incident. The mystery caller was thoroughly checked against the database but had no criminal record. The distance between states slowed the investigation. During this time, police were able to contact Rachel, the nanny accused of the triple murder. She denied any involvement. She was shocked by the incident, as she knew the family well and had no idea who could have committed the crime. Rachel had been Amanda and her children's nanny for many years. She cared for them and was very close to the family. Rachel had never known Amanda to have any problems that could have led to something so tragic. Amanda had always been calm and friendly, and the police believed that Rachel, with her young age and innocent demeanor, did not fit the profile of a suspect in the triple murder. She was genuinely concerned about the tragedy and cooperated with the investigation. Her involvement was considered unlikely, so the search for a suspect continued with other friends and acquaintances of the victims. This investigation lasted about 3 months without any breakthroughs. At this stage, thanks to additional funds, the reward for information about the criminal was increased to $100,000. However, this also did not lead to any clues. Finally, the criminal's conscience may have been tormented, leading to a shocking revelation about 3 months after the brutal massacre of the mother and her 2 children. A grieving woman, struggling to hold back tears, came to the police station. According to her, just minutes earlier, her daughter had confessed to the triple murder. Rachel, a 17-year-old nanny, occasionally visited her mother. During one visit, she felt overwhelmed by her responsibilities and could no longer bear the harsh truth. Rachel confessed to her mother that she had attacked the family that night and had burned the house to destroy the evidence. Her mother was shocked, never believing that her daughter was capable of such terrible acts. Although her mother's instinct was to protect her children, the details of the crime were too horrific. Rachel confessed, and her mother decided to turn her into the police. Rachel's confession earned her mother a $140 reward, which she refused. Her motives were not selfish, she simply wanted justice, even if it meant her daughter was punished. The police quickly moved in to arrest Rachel. She surrendered without a fight. There is more to this horrific story than initially appears. While under arrest, Rachel recounted the events of that fateful night in detail. She received a call that evening from an unnamed friend. The caller insisted on killing Amanda, describing it as a matter of urgency and importance, and ordered the nanny to carry out the act. The crime was premeditated, the caller planned it, and Rachel was allegedly the one to carry it out. However, the original plan was to wait until Amanda's children were not home to avoid harming them, but the friend then insisted on immediate action, urging Rachel to proceed with the plan even though the children were still in the house. The fire was deliberately set that night. The girl knew that murder would leave evidence that would lead the police to her. To eliminate this evidence, she planned to set it on fire in advance. On her way to visit her friend, Rachel bought a soda bottle, emptied it, and filled it with gasoline at a nearby gas station. After killing the children and their mother, she poured gasoline on the bodies and set them on fire. However, a confession alone may not be enough to secure her conviction in court. Without direct evidence, the case was at risk of going cold. But Rachel made one mistake during the commission of the triple murder. She cut herself with her own knife. She set the house on fire, expecting to destroy all evidence, but when Rachel fled the scene, she left a bloody handprint on the fence. Despite trying to wipe it off, she failed. This blood was later collected and analyzed in a lab, proving with complete certainty that it belonged to Rachel. Although she had almost managed to escape justice, having killed 3 people without being caught on camera or spotted by witnesses, her mistake was her downfall. After returning home post-murder, she destroyed evidence by burning her clothes and shoes. She also hid the knife in the forest, breaking it and burning its wooden handle along with her clothes. During a search in the forest area where the murder weapon was thought to be, police couldn't find it. However, they almost completely collected the wire winding from the knife handle on which Rachel's DNA was found. Despite all this valuable information on which the prosecution tactics would be built, the prosecutor believed that there was something more to this crime. The careful planning and knowledge of hiding traces suggested a well-prepared murder, not an impulsive act by a teenager coerced into crime. Some suspected there was at least one accomplice who remained unidentified throughout the trial. The original caller alerted the police about Rachel. The police met with this mystery person and conducted an interview. From the limited information released to the public, the informant had no reason to have any ill intentions toward her friend Amanda. They had been close friends for many years, so she was shocked by Rachel's accusation that she had ordered the murder of Amanda and the children. She vehemently denied the accusation and successfully passed a lie detector test. The next step was to conduct a psychiatric evaluation of Rachel, as she was exhibiting very strange behavior. It was important to assess her mental state, as it could affect her confession. It was not her decision to commit the crime, but rather her older friend who persuaded her. The police could not verify the conversation. Although the police obtained a recording of their discussion, there was no mention of any encouragement to commit a crime. They did talk shortly before the incident, but only about ordinary, everyday topics. It seems likely that the killer fabricated this story. There were significant concerns about her mental health. Several psychiatry experts evaluated Rachel, and they all agreed she suffered from serious mental disorders. She truly believed she had a conversation with her older friend, during which she was instructed to kill Amanda and the children. This suggests she may have been experiencing a severe condition, paranoid schizophrenia. In such cases, patients might hear voices, develop obsessive thoughts and hallucinations, and lose touch with reality. This can make them extremely dangerous. What would happen to the criminal? Rachel was seriously ill, which might allow her to receive treatment instead of a prison sentence, something the prosecutor's office did not want. The experts thoroughly examined the limited evidence available. It was clear that the criminal had acted intentionally. She meticulously planned everything, eliminated all evidence of the crime, and might have evaded justice if guilt hadn't weighed on her conscience. Rachel knew she had committed a crime because she tried to hide the evidence to avoid responsibility. She realized that she would face serious punishment for the triple murder. The defense presented their own psychiatric expert, who supported Rachel. During the trial, the doctor explained that Rachel's distorted perception might have led her to believe she was doing the right thing. He believed Rachel was insane at the time, as she heard voices during a conversation with an older friend, telling her that Amanda should be spared from suffering. Patients with paranoid schizophrenia often cannot distinguish between good and evil, yet their actions can seem deliberate. This explained Rachel's behavior and her meticulous efforts to eliminate evidence. The defense also acknowledged the involvement of another person in the crime, but the doctor argued that Rachel's mind had created this sinister plot and murder plan. The prosecution's psychiatrists spent hours evaluating Rachel's condition and discovered that she had been experiencing hallucinations for a long time. Rachel claimed that shop windows, advertisements, and even strangers on the street told her she needed to relieve Amanda of her suffering. This gradually became an obsession, constantly echoing in Rachel's mind, and she began to perceive it as a divine command, as if the universe itself wanted her to commit the crime. However, the last straw was a call from a friend in California. These mental problems continued for weeks. There was a period when Rachel heard the voices of snakes. Later, she began to hear demonic sounds. She saw ghosts. In one of these hallucinations, Rachel saw a pink cloud which, according to her, was hiding. And Rachel can communicate with the demons in her head. Rachel was tried as an adult because of the severity of the crime but was not facing the death penalty, which was in place in Texas in 2013. During the trial, Rachel agreed to a plea deal to reduce her sentence. According to Rachel, she arrived at Amanda's house at 3 a.m. and woke her up. Amanda went downstairs and found Rachel, who often babysat Amanda's children. A longtime family friend, Amanda welcomed Rachel warmly. To the younger members of the family, she was like a big sister. However, this time Rachel really did not come to their house with good intentions. Amanda was still alone. From the doorway, Rachel offered Amanda a glass of wine. After that, Rachel showed unusual signs. She tells Amanda that there is an unnamed friend who has bad intentions towards Amanda and the children. They discuss this but eventually conclude that it is all imaginary. After a while, Rachel is about to leave. They move to the living room. Rachel says goodbye to Amanda, stands up and walks towards the door. Just before she goes out, she suddenly turns around. Rachel pulls a knife from her belt and lunges at Amanda. A fight breaks out with screaming. Rachel stabs Amanda multiple times, killing her instantly. The noise wakes the children, who run into the living room to see what is going on. Guinevere senses danger and grabs her cell phone and runs into the back room to hide and call for help. She tries to dial, but unfortunately, it is not the police or emergency services. Instead, she calls her grandparents. Rachel then catches up with Guinevere and stabs her to death. Her younger brother meets the same fate. Rachel struggled to decide whether she would have spared the children if they had not witnessed the attack on their mother. She could have left them unharmed and simply fled, but she also intended to destroy evidence by burning down the house. Rachel pleaded guilty to all charges as part of a plea deal and chose not to appeal her sentence. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Whitney Hostler. Dayton is a city in Montgomery County, Ohio, United States, with a population of over 137,000. On July 27th of this year, Whitney Hostler was born into a dog family of two sisters. However, their parents' marriage was in trouble. 2 years after Whitney was born, tensions between her parents led to their separation. Due to the mother's health problems, full custody was given to the father, resulting in little contact with her growing up. Whitney was a cheerful and sociable girl. She had a strong creative instinct and loved to draw. Recognizing her talent, her father sent her to art school to hone her skills. Whitney's creativity was evident in all aspects of her life. As an adult, she loved to experiment with makeup and fashion, and even brought her creativity to home renovations. When Whitney was 12, her mother, Kimberly, improved and decided to move back in with her family. By then, Whitney's older sister, Chelsea, had grown up, got a job, and moved out of her father's house. Whitney, the youngest daughter, continued to live with her father. Kimberly wanted her daughters to live with her. However, reconnecting with Chelsea was difficult because she had her own life and did not feel the need for her mother's presence. But Whitney was interested in the idea of communicating with her mother. They began to see each other, went out, and became close. Eventually, Whitney moved in with her. For the next few years, she lived with her mother and continued to communicate with her father. At age 15, while in high school, Whitney met a boy named Randy Ryder. They were attracted to each other and gradually developed a romantic relationship. The relationship lasted for several years before Whitney introduced Randy to her parents and attended a family dinner at Ryder's. Their relationship was strong and they became inseparable. They finished school together, started working, and made plans to attend college. In 2017, Whitney discovered she was pregnant at the age of 22. Although the pregnancy was unplanned, the couple and their families took the news positively. The couple's parents were supportive, seeing the birth of their child as an opportunity to complete their family. Randy's parents, who were recently retired and had a lot of free time, offered to help the couple with childcare. Since Whitney and Randy needed to pursue their education and build their lives, they happily accepted Randy's parents' offer. The couple soon moved to St. Paris, a small town in Ohio with less than 2,000 residents, where Randy's family lived. For the first few months after moving in, while Whitney was pregnant, they lived in a one-room apartment and worked. After their daughter was born, they decided to move into Randy's parents' home. This move made their lives significantly easier, allowing them to balance school and work more effectively. It was also financially beneficial, as they did not have to spend a large portion of their income on rent. In addition, the grandparents were able to spend more time with their granddaughter. In addition to Randy's parents, his younger brother lived there as well. They all lived together as a large family. The friendly family supported each other, and everything seemed perfect. On October 1, 2020, Randy visited the police station to report his Whitney disappearance. He stated that the last time he saw her was on the evening of September 30th, following an argument between them. After the fight, he went out to meet friends. The conflict continued with his mother, Valerie, but Randy did not stay to see how it resolved. He explained that he and Whitney had planned to spend the evening together, but she decided to stay home. A few hours later, his friends were supposed to pick her up in a car to go have fun together. Randy admitted that at the appointed time, his friend came for Whitney. However, she was not waiting in the driveway as they had agreed. The friend called her several times, but Whitney ignored the calls. He waited for her in the car near the house for some time but then concluded that perhaps someone else had picked her up or her plans had changed. So he did not waste time and went to the party where he expected to meet her. When Randy arrived at the party, Whitney had not shown up, which worried him. He tried calling her several times, but she did not answer. Randy contacted his parents, who were home. They told him that Whitney had left shortly after him, getting into a car with a friend. Randy's mother, Valerie, saw an unfamiliar car pull into the driveway and watched Whitney get into the car. However, she could not tell who was in the car or how many people were inside because the windows were tinted. Whitney stopped communicating after that and was never seen again. Randy waited another day, hoping she would be with friends. Randy tried to find out who Whitney had left with, but eventually decided to contact the police for assistance. Initially, the police were skeptical of Randy, as people close to the victim are often considered in such cases. However, Randy's story was supported by his parents and friends. Randy's parents saw him leave for the party without Whitney, and he stayed there until his mother told him that Whitney had left on her own. His mother corroborated Randy's story, verifying that he had been at the party when Whitney disappeared. The police contacted Whitney's mother to gather more information about her whereabouts. Whitney's mother insisted that Whitney wouldn't just run away, as she was a responsible mother devoted to her child and wouldn't leave for long. With this information, the case didn't seem to be a simple disappearance, leading the police to begin a search for Whitney. Then, a man noticed something unusual while hiking in the woods near Kaiser Lake in Ohio. At the bottom of a cliff, he saw a person lying face down. Thinking it might be a tourist who had fallen, he tried calling out to them but got no response. He decided not to risk climbing down the cliff and instead contacted emergency services. Emergency responders arrived quickly and used specialized equipment to descend the steep cliff. When they got to the victim, it was clear that she was dead. The victim was a young woman and responders immediately noticed signs of strangulation on her neck and face. This ruled out a fall as a cause of death. Unfortunately, the victim had no identification on her. Police had to rely on her clothing and other identifying features, such as earrings, to try to identify her. The police reviewed recent missing person reports and quickly found a match. A forensic expert had identified the victim as Whitney. The forensic investigation confirmed that Whitney died from strangulation. Police began to investigate the circumstances surrounding her death. After examining the last hours of her life, they found that she had been in contact with her Randy, his father Rodney Sr., his mother Valerie, and younger brother Rodney Jr., who all lived in the same house. The police went to the Randy family's house but only found Randy's brother there. Rodney Jr. told them that his parents had taken their granddaughter and gone hunting. The police decided to talk to Rodney Jr. first. It was discovered that Rodney Jr. had been at work from early in the morning until late at night on the day Whitney went missing. This was confirmed by his co-workers and surveillance camera footage. When he returned home, Whitney had been dead for several hours, so Rodney Jr. was quickly eliminated as a suspect. Randy he had been at a party during the time Whitney went missing and was not considered a suspect. However, many questions remained for Randy's parents. Randy's mother Valerie was the only witness to see the girl leave the house and get into an unknown car after their son left. But no one else saw this. Randy's parents returned home 6 hours later, covered in mud. They claimed they had gone deer hunting in the woods, although there was considerable doubt about this. Valerie was able to describe the car Whitney had been in before she disappeared. But they did not see the license plate or the driver and did not take it seriously. Randy's parents did not pay much attention to the car because they knew Whitney was supposed to be picked up and taken to a party. They assumed that her friends had picked her up when she calmly got into the car, suggesting that she knew the driver. Around 7 p.m., as darkness fell, the police left the Randy family home. They had not gathered any useful information from witnesses and decided to check the area of the street where Whitney had disappeared. Randy's parents reported seeing a suspicious dark burgundy car with tinted windows parked there. The car sat next to the family's white pickup truck until Whitney left the house and got into the car. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the area. As the police passed the pickup, they accidentally noticed some suspicious items in its open bed. Inside, they found several black garbage bags with remnants of adhesive tape, along with women's gloves caked in mud. The collection of items did not resemble those typically used for hunting. The officers were aware that garbage bags and tape are often associated with covering up murders. The items appeared to have been used to restrain someone and then quickly discarded. On the tape, police found several strands of hair stuck together, similar in color and length to Whitney's. There was also a large two-wheeled luggage cart that looked dirty, indicating it had been recently driven on a dirt road. Initially, police did not alert the cart's owner to their discovery. However, they began to suspect the family's involvement in Whitney's disappearance. The police calmly returned to the house and requested to inspect the Whitney room. They aimed to conduct a search and obtain her mobile phone and computer for analysis. Valerie permitted the police to enter. Police inspected the Whitney room and found the She mobile phone, along with an almost empty roll of tape identical to the one found in the pickup truck. Hair was present on the tape. Officers reported this finding to the homeowners and requested an explanation. Randy's parents remained calm and began answering questions. They explained that Whitney had been cleaning her room and that her hair may have gotten caught in the tape while she was combing her hair. She had recently been sick, causing her hair to fall out, which everyone, including Randy, confirmed. Despite their confident statements, the police suspected that Valerie and her husband Randy were lying, and the explanation of hair falling out and getting stuck in the tape seemed implausible. The police did not notice any change in their behavior as they explained the evidence. However, after a while, Randy's father became very emotional. He was breathing heavily, could not sit still, and took a long time to answer each question the police asked. They found his behavior suspicious and decided to question him further at the police station. He was taken there and repeated the same story as his son. According to him, there had been a serious argument just before Whitney left for the party. The conflict began with Whitney and Randy arguing in their room. Randy's mother Valerie intervened when Whitney became angry, she claiming that she had evidence that Randy was cheating on her and was determined to break up with him. Not only did she intend to leave him, but she also intended to take her daughter back to her mother's house. During the argument, Valerie entered the room when she heard the commotion, trying to calm Whitney down. Meanwhile, Randy, upset about the situation, went to a party by himself. According to Valerie, after calming Whitney down, she left with her friends in an unknown car, leaving everyone uncertain about her whereabouts. Randy's father later confirmed that his son had been unfaithful and had a mistress. This came to light when the mistress reported that she was pregnant, just days before Whitney went missing. Whitney believed that the child was her husband's and the mistress's, which caused her to leave him. The situation seemed suspicious, especially since Randy had withheld this information during the initial interrogation and his family had a motive for wanting to get rid of Whitney. Randy was also questioned by the police. He was asked why he had not mentioned the argument over the mistress. Randy said that he had not told the police right away because he thought it was irrelevant to the search for Whitney and did not want to incriminate himself. At the time, Whitney's death was unknown. However, the police believed that this fact, combined with the conflict with Randy's parents, sealed Whitney's fate. Randy confirmed his father's account, admitting that during the argument, he and Whitney were in his room on the second floor. Whitney initiated the argument, accusing him of cheating and declaring she would end their relationship and move out with her daughter. When his mother got involved, they continued the discussion loudly and went downstairs. Eventually, the argument subsided, but Randy heard some strange. A few minutes later, his father walked into Randy's room, clearly agitated, and made an unusual request. He asked Randy to leave the house for a few days and make public appearances so people would know where he was. Without questioning what had happened, Randy packed his things and went to see his friends, with whom he had planned to hang out that night. He never saw Whitney again. Randy's behavior seemed strange, and the police were puzzled as to why he would leave the house at his father's request without asking about the situation downstairs. Randy explained that he was upset and distracted by problems with his mistress, so he trusted his parents. He assumed that his father was asking him to take a few days off, so that Whitney could cool down after their argument. Because of their conflict, Randy did not look for her and left without her. Everyone at the party assumed that Whitney was not there because of their argument. No one suspected that she might have disappeared or been harmed. The party guests noticed Randy's sadness throughout the evening. He tried calling Whitney several times, but she did not answer. He did not really know what was wrong with her and thought that she was ignoring him because of their argument. However, Randy understood that she could not have simply disappeared. Even if they split, they still have many related issues to resolve, including child custody. Finally, Randy went to the police, and Whitney's body was later discovered at the bottom of a ravine. All evidence pointed to Randy's parents as the perpetrators, having killed Whitney on the first floor and then disposing of her body to make it look like a suicide. However, experienced forensic experts and police saw through the deception. The police informed Valerie, Randy, and his family that Whitney's body was not found. This was to emotionally shock them and to see how the suspects would react. After the news of the death was announced, the police noticed how Randy's family members reacted. Randy's father immediately became concerned, but not because he was sad about Whitney's death. It was clear that he was hiding something and was afraid of being found out. In response, the police decided to make a bold move. They showed Randy's father photos of the scene where Whitney was found. Upon seeing the horrifying images of his niece's mother's body, the man broke down, revealing his guilt. This psychological tactic helped expose his involvement. The man started speaking, stating that on the day Whitney disappeared, he was napping in the bedroom on the first floor. He was jolted awake by a loud, suspicious noise. The disturbance from the next room lasted for several minutes. Concerned, he got up to see what was happening. When he entered the adjacent bedroom, he found Whitney lying motionless on the bed, face up. A bag was tightly taped around her neck. Next to the bed, Valerie stood holding a roll of adhesive tape. The man reported being in shock, with the next few hours feeling like a blur. His wife told him that she was filled with rage upon realizing she would never see her granddaughter again, which led her to instinctively strangle Whitney. The man quietly assisted his wife in disposing of the body, acting mechanically. Before this, he had sent his son away to prevent him from witnessing the incident. After the son left, the man returned to the room where Valerie was trying to place the body in large plastic bags. He described himself as being in a strange state, silently watching in pain but unable to act. He remained in a stupor until his wife asked him to bring a two-wheeled cart and a large bag. After Valerie and her husband managed to pack Whitney's body, they loaded it into the back of a pickup truck. They returned to the house and stayed there for a while as Valerie decided where to dispose of the body. She chose a cliff near the lake. Since they couldn't leave Whitney's 2-year-old daughter alone in the house, they placed her in the back seat of the truck. They arrived at the location late at night. The child was asleep and unaware that her mother's body was being disposed of at that moment. The most tragic part is that Whitney's death was caused by people she considered close and trusted. After dumping the body, the couple gathered trash bags, duct tape, a bag, and a cart, intending to dispose of the evidence later. The police later discovered the evidence, and they never had a chance to dispose of it. During the interrogation, Valerie remained calm and emotionless. While she was in another room, the police interviewed each suspect separately, and Valerie did not know that her husband had confessed until the very end. She still insisted that Whitney had left in an unknown car. However, Valerie's demeanor changed dramatically when police informed her of her husband's confession from the next room. No longer needing to pretend, she admitted to strangling Whitney, corroborating her husband's statement. As the only person present at the time of the victim's death, Valerie could finally recount what happened on that fateful evening. According to the woman, a heated argument erupted between Whitney and Randy upstairs. When Whitney threatened to leave with the child, the woman intervened. Whitney became enraged, threatening to cut off all contact between the child and her grandparents. Valerie was terrified that Whitney would follow through on her threats. The thought of losing contact with her beloved granddaughter was unbearable. In a moment of desperation, Valerie lost control and attacked Whitney, strangling her. Valerie described the incident as a moment of insanity, claiming she never intended to kill Whitney. Despite this, the physical evidence suggested otherwise, with marks on Whitney's body indicating a violent struggle. Valerie claimed that they had argued. After the bag was placed around Whitney's neck, Valerie appeared in a doorway, dazed with shock. Valerie then ordered her husband to send Randy away to provide him with an alibi. Valerie's confession matched this account. She claimed that the attack occurred while she was emotionally distressed, implying that she did not realize what she was doing. This confession was particularly disturbing to the police, as the murder was committed in front of a child and the body was disposed of with the child present. Valerie and her husband were arrested, but Randy was not, due to lack of evidence against him. This caused public outrage, as neighbors and relatives of the deceased believed that Randy was involved in the crime. They suspected that Randy's parents had covered for him so that he could retain custody of the children and remain free. Suspicions grew because Randy had left the scene of the murder and had previously concealed information from the police. Additionally, his father had advised him to have an alibi, which further cast doubt on his innocence. People questioned whether a 52-year-old woman could have overpowered the young, healthy Whitney. Despite these suspicions, Randy denied all charges and passed a polygraph test, which resulted in him being cleared of all charges. In preparation for trial in December 2020, Randy's Rodney Sr. father pursued a plea deal. In exchange for his cooperation, he received a 3-year prison sentence and was released on March 28, 2023. Valerie Ryder's trial began in February 2021, where her defense attorneys proclaimed her innocence and argued that Whitney had been abducted and killed by someone else. They also implicated Randy's father, Rodney Sr., as the real culprit. However, the prosecution effectively countered these claims by introducing DNA evidence linking Valerie to the crime. Both her husband and son testified against her, leaving little hope for the defense. Ultimately, the jury found Valerie Ryder guilty of first-degree murder and tampering with evidence, and sentenced her to life in prison. She will be eligible for parole in 21 years, in 2041. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Maria Katabi. In 2003, Dr. Paul Jarrett was 82 years old. Despite his age, he remained strong and healthy. He was a respected psychiatry professor, well known in the area. From a young age, he aspired to succeed in this field. He pursued education, secured a job at a clinic, and eventually, after gaining experience, opened his own practice. His successful career allowed him to buy his dream house and enjoy a comfortable life for many years. Paul lived there with his wife and their 4 children, Paul Jr., Greg, Aletta, and Mark. Together, they built a happy life into their later years. In 2002, the family faced a tragedy when his beloved wife passed away. It was a significant loss for Paul, but he persevered. He planned to continue working at his clinic as long as he was able. His calm and balanced personality drew people to him. By 2003, Paul was still running his private practice and had a close relationship with his youngest son, Greg. Greg visits and takes care of him often. They go fishing and run marathons together. Greg followed in his father's footsteps and became a doctor. He was working at a hospital in Miami while also pursuing further medical education. Before he moved to live with his father, Greg married his assistant at the clinic, and they had a child together. However, his marriage did not last. A few years after their child's birth, he divorced his wife and returned to care for his father, who required support and attention. Although Greg's father was cheerful and desired an active life, he needed assistance in his old age, and Greg was willing to help him. On July 16, 2003, Greg did not show up for work. He was expected at the hospital by 7 a.m. to work until 3:30 p.m., but even by 7:30 a.m., he still hadn't arrived. This concerned his colleagues since he was known for his punctuality and responsibility. They attempted to contact him by phone, but he did not answer. At that time, Greg was dating a nurse named Monica. His colleagues reached out to her to find out about Greg's whereabouts, but she informed them that she had not seen him since the previous evening when he left to go home and take care of his father. They attempted to call Paul, the father of the missing doctor, but he didn't answer his phone. Next, they contacted the Paul workplace, where his assistant informed them that Paul hadn't shown up there either. She didn't know his whereabouts and mentioned that her calls to him were also unanswered. This situation was increasingly worrying. Concerned, Monica decided to visit Paul's home to investigate further, fearing that, given his age, he might have had an accident and could require assistance. When she got to the house, she immediately saw that Paul's car was gone from the driveway. There were no other signs of alarm. She knocked on the door, but it was locked. Monica walked inside. The house was messy and quiet. Feeling uneasy and afraid that there might be a robber inside, she did not dare to go any further. She called 911 to report Paul missing. The dispatcher found the situation suspicious, suspecting that a crime might be committed. Monica agreed and decided to wait for the police to arrive. When the officers arrived, they made a horrifying discovery. Inside, they found Paul Jarrett lying lifeless on the floor, having been shot in the head. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting he was likely shot while asleep and died instantly. During their initial inspection, officers noticed black spots around the gunshot wounds and on the bed linen, indicating traces of gunpowder gases that had burned his skin. It was clear that the attacker was very close to Paul when he was shot. In the next room, Greg was found, and his death was far from peaceful. The noise of the shooting likely woke him up. He got up to investigate and encountered the attacker. There were probably 2 criminals involved. Greg was shot 4 times. He attempted to defend himself, first attacking the shooter but was immediately wounded in the arms. Realizing he was outmatched, he tried to escape, prompting the criminal to shoot wildly. The police found several bullet holes in the walls. Furniture in the rooms was overturned, and items from shelves were scattered on the floor. At first glance, it appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. Typically, thieves target houses when the owners are absent, but sometimes they encounter them. If the criminals have a weapon, they might use it to eliminate unwanted witnesses. However, in this case, the victims were intentionally targeted. Paul was clearly killed in his sleep and never saw the criminals' faces, posing no threat to them. Greg was also asleep during the invasion, and if the intruders hadn't made noise with gunfire, he wouldn't have been a problem for them. Robbers do not usually act this way. They only open fire if the homeowner spots them during the robbery and recognizes them. The police soon realized that the attackers had come with the intention of killing, and that the rearrangement of the furniture was just a setup to throw the investigation off track. Furthermore, the locks showed no signs of damage, suggesting that the perpetrator knew the victims, either breaking into the house or being let in voluntarily. The presence of numerous visible valuables and cash left untouched in the house suggested it wasn't a typical robbery, as a real thief would have likely taken them. It's possible the criminal was targeting specific valuables, but that's just speculation. Many neighbors later described the area as peaceful, safe, and where incidents were rare. The deceased had good relationships with neighbors and apparently had no enemies. Typically, Paul, like many residents, didn't lock his doors, trusting those around him as friends, not foes. Paul was well liked by his neighbors and was a respected physician. Police could not determine a specific motive for the crime. Strangely, Paul's car was missing, as was a gun in Greg's safe. Greg had a weapon for self-defense, but ballistics tests showed that the men had been shot with different guns. None of the neighbors heard the gunshots, which was highly unusual, suggesting the use of a silencer. Although there were several small houses near the Paul house, no one saw anything unusual. Forensic experts had not found any useful evidence in the house. Paul's car was found about 20 kilometers from the crime scene. The car was reported missing. The doctor's car was left in a parking lot near a dry cleaners, with the doors unlocked and the keys still in the ignition, as if the criminal had expected it to be stolen. Fortunately, police found the car. After a thorough examination, forensic scientists could not find any DNA or fingerprints inside. The criminal wore gloves or wiped away any traces. There was nothing in the surveillance footage. The killer acted professionally and avoided being caught on camera. With no leads, the police were left with limited resources. The police had nothing left but to start checking the immediate surroundings of the doctors in search of suspects. The first person they focused on was Monica, who had called 911. Although she had done the right thing by notifying the police and not entering the house herself, police questioned whether she knew what she would find inside and deliberately avoided going inside. After reviewing the evidence, they determined that Monica had no motive for Greg and Paul's deaths and had actually suffered a loss because she and Greg are dating and are getting ready to get married. And Monica had a verified alibi and were eliminated as suspects. Likewise, Greg's ex-wife also had an alibi and was not considered a suspect. The investigation then focused on his father, Paul Jareth, a renowned psychiatrist. Although he could have difficult clients, and everyone was in a bad mood from time to time, people with problems could easily be hurt, leading to resentment. However, Dr. Paul's practice was impeccable. He was highly regarded by his colleagues and patients, and no dissatisfied clients were found. While police were investigating various leads, searches continued at the victims' homes. A forensic scientist found a letter from a credit union addressed to Paul, sent shortly before his death. The letter alerted him to some suspicious transactions on his bank account, which caught the attention of the police. They discovered that access to Paul's account had been granted to his trusted assistant Maria Katabi. This raised suspicions about her potential involvement in the tragedy. Police learned that Maria had repeatedly attempted to cash counterfeit checks at banks, involving the embezzlement of tens of thousands of dollars. However, despite her persistence, the credit union did not approve the fraudulent transactions. Maria had no problem with her salary. She earned a lot of money and Paul appreciated her work. However, it appeared that she had been stealing money from him, which was discovered by a strange coincidence. Just a few days later, Paul was found dead in his home, making it seem as if Maria had a strong motive for the crime. Maria therefore became the prime suspect. She was summoned to the police station to discuss the use of her boss's money. Maria denied any involvement in the murder, claiming that there was no reason to kill Paul as they had long since settled all their financial issues. A reliable employee reported that Paul caught Maria writing several counterfeit checks. She was struggling financially and had informed her boss about these issues. The assistant felt that resorting to illegal actions was her only option. Paul and Maria had worked together for many years, and he had grown very fond of her, trusting her completely. As a result, according to Maria, he forgave her financial fraud, and they continued to work together. Maria indeed had confirmed financial troubles, including tax issues and to her property. She was going through a divorce. Given these problems, Paul felt sympathetic towards her and did not plan to terminate her employment. During the investigation, it was found that Maria had stolen $100,000 from Paul. He trusted her so much that he didn't scrutinize her financial dealings. The last transaction she made was for $9,000. It was not possible to prove any involvement of the Maria in what happened. Maria had no other motive for any criminal acts and had a confirmed alibi for the incident, as did other possible suspects. Ultimately, the police reached a dead end and had to remove Maria from the suspect list. For many months, the case made no progress. Police repeatedly reviewed all the evidence but found no clues. Maria was the only possible motive, but her alibi excluded her as a suspect. Ultimately, police was waiting for the attacker to slip up in some way. They needed something concrete, like a murder weapon. The only forensic evidence was a few shell casings. Police hoped the killer would use their weapon again, making it possible to catch them. However, if the criminal was clever, they likely disposed of the gun used in the double murder. In such a case, police needed to wait for them to use a stolen gun. They constantly monitored news reports, focusing on gun-related crimes. The strategy was clear: all they could do was wait. The toughest time was for Alette Jareth, the daughter of the Paul. For months after her father and brother were shot, she returned to their home. In the Paul family, she was left alone. Paul and Greg were gone. Alette, grieving and alone, came to a house where she had lost her loved ones, an older brother who was killed, another family member who died after stopping NMI substances, and a third who died in a car accident. She didn't intend to stay long in the house, as its gloomy atmosphere was overwhelming. Her goal was to create a memorial video and gather the belongings of her relatives because the house was scheduled for demolition. Alette began recording, wanting to walk through the rooms one last time to remember the happy years when her loved ones were still alive. It reminded her of the day Paul died. She walked through the rooms, collecting items that were precious to her and had been left untouched for months. Among these was her father's jacket. While checking the pockets, she discovered a letter from her father's assistant, Maria Katabi. In the letter, Maria apologized profusely to her boss and elaborated on her family issues, struggles with redeeming the house, and tax debts. She confessed to embezzlement and promised to return the money once her problems were resolved. Alette turned to the police for help. They had several questions about the letter. They wondered why Maria wrote an apology letter if she claimed she and Paul were involved. It was clear she was lying about the boss knowing about her financial fraud. During the first interrogation, Maria didn't mention the letter, so the police asked her to come to the station again to explain. Maria, a trusted employee, admitted she had forgotten about the note. She explained that she was initially afraid to admit the embezzlement, fearing the boss would fire her. So, she decided to write a confession letter first and then speak to him in person. Maria left the note on her boss's desk at the end of the workday when he was gone but planned to retrieve it the next morning, as she had changed her mind and wanted to discuss the matter face to face. Unfortunately, the note was no longer on the desk the following morning, indicating that Paul had already taken it. In any case, she spoke with her boss, and they came to an agreement on repaying the debt. Maria's story seemed unconvincing, especially since the police had already caught her lying, which made them suspect her involvement in the case once more. However, there was no concrete evidence proving her guilt. 8 months after the murder, there was a real breakthrough in the investigation. A man was arrested for an unrelated crime. The most interesting thing is that he used similar firearms, a .22 caliber pistol. After checking, it turned out that his shells were identical to those found in the house of the Paul Jarrett. Meanwhile, a confidential informant tipped off the police about a planned armored car robbery. The criminals intended to recruit someone among the security guards to carry out their plan, which involved killing the other guards and stealing the cash transport. However, the security guard approached by the criminals decided to outsmart them. He informed the police of their plan, which led to the successful capture of the suspects. The individuals were identified as Jose Barca and Ruben Fernandez. Notably, one of them possessed the same pistol used in the shootings of Paul and Greg. Furthermore, a pistol stolen from the Paul residence was also found in their possession, eliminating any possibility of coincidence. This evidence confirmed their involvement in the double murder. The reason why no neighbors heard gunshots during the attack became apparent. The perpetrators had used silencers on their guns. During the interrogation, the police discovered that they had another accomplice, Juan Carlos Fernandez. He admitted to knowing Maria Katabi, with whom he had a romantic relationship that Maria had hidden from the police. Juan confessed that Maria had asked him to break into her boss Paul's house to retrieve a letter. Maria had previously stolen money from Paul and had written a confession of embezzlement, which she left on Paul's desk. She later regretted this but was too scared to ask the doctor to return the letter. Maria wanted to destroy the letter but had no chance, so she begged Juan to help her get it back. The consequences could have been serious, potentially costing her both her job and her freedom if her boss contacted the police. Not wanting to go to jail, Maria asked her boyfriend to help her steal the letter. Juan agreed and asked his brother Ruben and his friend Jose to do the job. Maria gave them information about the house. All she asked for was a letter admitting her embezzlement. She did not kill them. She also said that Paul's house rarely locked its front door, so gaining access to the house was not a problem, allowing the criminals to easily break in. However, they did not know where to find a small note in such a large house. Realizing that this might wake the homeowner, they decided that they would kill them first and then search the house without getting caught. So that is what they did. They shot Paul first, then his son Greg. Surprisingly, even after searching the entire house, they could not find the note they were looking for. The robbers then left, taking the gun with them. Despite a thorough police search, the note was never found. Paul's attentive daughter accidentally discovered this crucial piece of evidence. All 3 accomplices involved in Greg's shooting were arrested. They attempted to prove their innocence in the murders of the doctors. Jose Barca was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Juan Carlos's trial took much longer than those of the other defendants. He underwent mental evaluations and claimed he was not aware of the true nature of events. He had been struggling with significant mental health issues for many years, casting doubt on his ability to perceive reality accurately. It was known that he had suffered a serious head injury, which was exacerbated by a fall from a great height, worsening his mental problems. This was the main cause of the incident. Questions quickly arose as to whether one knew renowned psychiatrist Paul Jarrett and had a grudge against him, which could have been the real motive for the crime. However, these speculations could not be confirmed. In the end, Juan still had to stand trial. In 2016, nearly 13 years after the crime, he confessed to the murders of Paul Jarrett and Greg. He apologized to the victims' families and asked them to pray for him in the name of Christ. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His brother, Ruben Fernandez, also admitted to being an accomplice in the robbery because he was the driver. Ruben said he did not know about Juan and Jose's murderous intentions. They had originally come to the house to retrieve a letter. When the shooting began, Reuben feared that the homeowner was shooting at the robbers. So he fled the scene. As a result, he was sentenced to 7 years of probation. This light sentence was due to a lack of evidence linking him to the murders. Maria Katabi was arrested and had to stand trial. She had a troubled past, but things seemed to improve when she got a job at Floordrot. She was desperate to find the letter, as losing it could endanger her life and job security. Maria had no previous convictions, so her lawyer was optimistic about securing a suspended sentence. Maria Katabi went to trial. The prosecution insisted on a harsh sentence for the double murder, arguing that she had orchestrated the crime by directing the perpetrators to Paul's home. If Maria had not tried to find the letter she had written and given to Paul, it is possible that both victims would still be alive. The prosecutor's office needed evidence. In the meantime, Maria was in jail and talking to another inmate. During one conversation, Maria made a surprising confession to the inmate. She revealed that the doctor had no intention of firing her or contacting the police, he just wanted his money back. However, Maria was broke and in danger of losing her home due to mounting debt. She had no intention of returning the stolen money. As a trusted employee, she knew the doctor well and knew about the valuables in his home, which she saw as an opportunity to make more money. Maria staged the robbery and implicated her boyfriend to avoid incriminating herself and reduce her sentence. The lawyer insisted that Maria could not be charged with double murder. She didn't shoot the victims, didn't plan the murders, and never even entered their house. The defense argued that Maria's primary target was the note, which could be crucial to serious legal charges, not murder. It was reasonable for her to get rid of such potentially damaging evidence. In her statement, Maria repeated her testimony. She gave the doctor the note with the plan to retrieve it the next day and discuss it directly with her boss. However, when she returned, the note was gone from the table. The woman admitted that she had lured her boyfriend and his friends into the robbery, not knowing that they were dangerous and potentially violent. During the trial, Maria tearfully shared tragic episodes in her life. She testified that she had been raped when she was 18 and had suffered abuse from her abusive father. She was regularly beaten by her husband after that. She hoped to escape this vicious cycle of abuse with her boss's money, but that plan failed. The jury found Maria Katabi not guilty of double murder, but guilty of armed robbery, and sentenced her to 30 years in prison. During the trial, Alette stated that she had let go of her anger and hostility toward the defendants. Instead, she chose to focus on the good memories of her loved ones and seek justice. Alette now plans to honor Juan Carlos' request by praying for him. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angela Wilder. Angela Wilder was born in 1985 in San Diego, California, USA, as the youngest daughter in her family. She had an older sister named Cree, and they were very close. Both of her parents were in the military, so the family often moved. This often leads to tension within their families. Eventually, Angela's parents decided to divorce while she was still in school. Angela's mother met someone new, and they moved with him to Phoenix City, Alabama, a small town with a population of 40,000. After the move, her mother left the military. The family became regular attendees of the local church, as they had always been religious. In high school, Angela met Christopher Jackson, and they quickly developed feelings for each other. They began dating, marking Angela's first love. However, the relationship was short-lived because Angela prioritized her education. She needed to move to attend the University of South Alabama. Christopher found the breakup difficult as he genuinely loved Angela, but he didn't want to stand in the way of her dreams. In 2004, Angela met a preacher's son named Daniel. At that time, she was still in university but quickly became involved in a relationship with him. Before long, Angela became pregnant, and the couple decided to marry. They had a wedding and soon welcomed a daughter. However, financial struggles and work stress took a toll on their relationship. Angela's feelings for Daniel faded quickly, and she realized he wasn't the partner she wanted for life. After 2 years of marriage, Angela decided to file for divorce and seek full custody of their daughter. After graduating from university, Angela returned to her hometown and lived in her parents' house. Her mother and sister supported her by helping take care of her daughter. During one visit to the local church, she met Richie Wilder, a former schoolmate. Richie has a hot temper and often causes trouble. Many people believe that the reason is because he was raised in an unhappy family. His father was an alcoholic who often mistreated his mother, who couldn't do anything about it. While many people avoided Richie, Angela believed she saw a different side of him and thought she could bring out his best qualities. Richie and Angela formed a close relationship and they started dating. Angela mentioned that Richie got along well with her daughter and treated her kindly. However, Angela's relatives quickly observed negative changes in her behavior at the start of her relationship with Richie. They noticed that Angela became quieter, more difficult to understand, and more stressed. Despite everyone's worry and advice to keep her distance from him, but Angela did not heed their warnings. In January 2009, Richie and Angela got married. Richie took Angela and her daughter to the family home, and they moved to the city of Minot, North Dakota. It's a small town with about 40,000 people, a very tight-knit local community, and includes armed forces facilities. There is also a military base where Richie was stationed. In 2010, Angela found out she was pregnant. During that time, she started working at a supply store on the military base. Some people close to Richie and Angela noticed issues in their relationship. Angela's co-workers noticed that Richie was often rude and aggressive towards her. He often insults Angela and makes her cry, even though she is very vulnerable. She later revealed that he was not only cruel to her but also to her daughter. It was discovered that he regularly abused the whole family but did so without leaving any marks. This abuse continued for years. The couple had 2 children, a boy and a girl. When Angela reached her breaking point, she officially reported the violence to the police. When the investigation started, all of Richie's colleagues and the military base management supported him. He convinced people that his wife, Angela, was unstable and had mental health issues. Angela lacked solid evidence of her husband's mistreatment, and the backing Richie received from the military base management helped cover up the case. Despite this, Angela was determined to end the relationship while keeping custody of their children. While trying to prove Richie was cruel, Angela herself faced accusations from him. Richie alleged that Angela had anger management issues, and he proved it thanks to the support of his colleagues. Ultimately, Angela, a mother of 2, was referred to an anger management specialist and prescribed sedatives. Friends familiar with Angela insisted she never had such issues, and no one had seen her act aggressively. They believed Richie orchestrated the situation to discredit her with the authorities. However, Angela still followed the treatment regimen, with the aim of understanding and dealing with her condition. Around 2 weeks after, Richie and Angela reconciled, but peace in their relationship was short-lived. Angela soon filed for divorce, and their marriage ended in May 2012. Richie faced a military tribunal. Despite opposition from the officers at the military base, Angela succeeded in proving the violence against her and the children. Due to uncovered family issues and deceit, Richie was dismissed from service. Angela did not want to share custody and planned to move with the children back to Alabama. This decision angered Richie. He wanted to maintain a relationship with the children, visit them regularly, and have them over on weekends. This disagreement led to frequent arguments between the ex-spouses. Richie consistently opposed the idea and even threatened Angela. During the World Cup, Angela confided her plan to her loved ones, and despite opposition, she went through with her decision and moved to another state. Besides, Richie also relocated to a nearby city within the state and began working as a junior staff member at a hospital. In this new city, he met Cynthia Becker, a kindergarten teacher. They began dating, and their relationship quickly progressed. Eventually, they got married and started a family. Despite this, Richie remained troubled by the custody arrangement of his children, as his ex-wife, Angela, had been granted full custody. He maintained contact with his son and daughter primarily through phone calls, but the disputes between them persisted. Despite everything that happened, Angela seemed genuinely happy. She had started dating Christopher Jackson again, her first boyfriend from high school. Previously, they had broken up so she could pursue her education. After many years of separation, the love between them burned stronger than ever. Angela told her family that she had finally found someone with whom she felt warmth, and they had a son. Angela and Christopher were planning their wedding, and she was pregnant again. She had no idea she would soon have to fight for her life. On the evening of November 13, 2015, Christopher went to work for his night shift at a local 24-hour Walmart. He didn't have a car, so Angela usually picked him up after his shift at 7 a.m. However, on that night, Angela stopped responding to his calls and messages. They typically stayed in touch during his shifts. But communication ended around 3 a.m. when Angela texted that she heard a noise outside and felt she was being followed. Christopher only saw the message 2 hours later because he was busy with work. Concerned, he tried calling Angela, but she didn't answer. He assumed she might have fallen asleep or gone to a clinic in the morning for pregnancy tests. But when Angela didn't arrive to pick him up as planned, Christopher began to worry then. At the time, Angela was enrolled in a nursing program at Minot University and had recently discovered she was pregnant again. Christopher thought she might have gone to the hospital if she felt unwell or if their son was sick, which might explain why she wasn't responding to his calls and messages. Even though he understood her possible situation, the strangeness didn't stop there. Normally, she would immediately call Christopher in such a case. If he didn't answer, she will at least send a text message to inform him of any problems. So, he was confused about why Angela suddenly stopped all communication, which was not like her. Christopher kept calling, but his calls always went to voicemail. Too worried, he rushed back home, then he knocked on the bedroom window where Angela might be sleeping. However, when he saw the back door, he realized something terrible might have happened that night. There were signs of a break-in, as if the door had been forcefully knocked down. Christopher looked inside and called Angela's name several times, but there was no response. He didn't enter the house, fearing something bad might be inside. Instead, he immediately called 911 to report the situation. He explained that Angela hadn't answered his phone for several hours and didn't pick him up from work as usual. He asked the dispatcher if he could go inside to find out what happened, but the dispatcher advised against it, suggesting there might be a criminal inside waiting for another victim. Christopher was instructed to wait outside for the police. He urged them to hurry because Angela was pregnant, and he was concerned for her and their unborn child's safety. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. During this time, Christopher waited outside for them. He could only enter the house once they arrived. From the outside, everything appeared normal, the furniture was in place, and everything was clean and tidy. However, Angela still did not respond to his calls. When the officers approached the main bedroom and opened the door, the reason for Angela's silence became clear. One officer turned on the light and discovered a horrifying scene. There was so much blood that the bed linen items were all mixed into a red mess. On the bed lay 30-year-old Angela, showing no signs of life. She was stabbed multiple times. During the attack, Angela's 2-year-old son was in the house. He remained silent, and no sounds came from his room. Christopher, alarmed, rushed to check on him, but thankfully, he was just sleeping and unharmed, as he was not the killer's target. The other children were with their grandmother that day. Christopher immediately accused Richie of being the one who killed Angela, having no other suspects for who could have harmed Angela so brutally. She had no other enemies. After marrying Richie, Angela had a daughter and a son, who were 10 and 4 years old at the time of the tragedy. Although the judge awarded Angela full custody, but Richie had visitation rights and to be involved in their children's lives. Richie took the kids away for the weekend and intended to contest custody so they could live with him forever. Angela opposed this due to his cruel nature, leading to constant arguments between them. Later, there is evidence that Richie may have been involved in the murder of his ex-wife, Angela. For example, Crystal, Angela's sister, informed the police that Richie had aggressively entered Angela's house after their divorce and said that if he wanted, he could reach her. However, Richie never used physical force in public, so these claims remained unproven. The forensic expert concluded that by the time Angela was found, she had been killed with over 1,000 stab wounds. She had fought desperately against the attack, as evidenced by the cuts on her hands, likely from trying to defend herself. The police quickly observed that valuables in the house were still intact, indicating that the attacker was not motivated by theft but by a desire to kill Angela. Investigating her personal life, the police noted that Angela and Richie had a hostile relationship and were frequently in conflict. Richie had been discharged from military service for violence against Angela and their children. Relatives of Angela confirmed that the relationship between her and Richie was very strained. Angela avoided interacting with Richie when he came to pick up the children, so Christopher usually handled the exchanges. Christopher detailed the issues between Angela and Richie, expressing his dislike for Richie's aggressive behavior, although he managed to avoid direct conflicts with him. After gathering all the information, the detectives focused on Richie, who became the main suspect. Richie agreed to speak with them and firmly denied any involvement in the incident. Since the evidence collected had not yet been analyzed, they had nothing to confront him with, so they continued questioning him. Richie provided an alibi, stating that he left work around 7 p.m. and went home. His new wife, Cynthia, confirmed that Richie was with her at home the entire night. However, the investigators noticed several wounds on Richie's hands and face that resembled scratches, which could be defensive wounds inflicted by Angela during a struggle. Richie claimed these injuries were from playing with a child. The detectives doubted his explanation and decided to review CCTV footage from the area, requesting the recordings. After reviewing the footage from the cameras that might have captured the criminal arriving to commit the murder, Richie's car was not seen. However, this didn't mean much as the attacker could have gone unnoticed. The police collected DNA samples from Richie for testing and obtained a warrant to search his car. The car's interior was extremely clean, except for a small red stain on the front passenger seat door. Forensic experts collected these materials for examination. Suspicions about Richie increased. He was asked to take a polygraph test. Although a polygraph is not admissible in court, detectives wanted to observe his reaction and behavior during the test. Initially, Richie agreed, but he never showed up for it. Despite his refusal, this was insufficient to arrest him or press charges, so investigators decided to look into his background more thoroughly. All the employees at the hospital where Richie works were aware of the investigation. Despite this, he was fired a few weeks after the investigation started. A complaint was filed against him for he pushing an elderly patient. Richie later justified his actions by claiming nervous tension caused by pressure from police officers. Meanwhile, detectives were gathering more evidence of Richie's involvement in Angela's murder. DNA traces were found that matched samples from the suspected killer. Richie, suggesting that he was the one Angela had fought off in her bedroom. Richie declared that maybe the recently time he picked up the kids he accidentally left a trace of DNA there. However, this explanation seemed implausible since the last meeting was with Christopher, and he and Angela had no contact with each other. The examination confirmed that the drop of blood in Richie's car belonged to Angela's. Richie claimed it might have been from when they were still together, as Angela allegedly had blood pressure issues and occasionally had nosebleeds. However, the blood appeared very fresh. His explanation seemed like attempts to mislead the investigation, revealed many contradictions in his testimony. The police finally arrested Richie for Angela's murder, but he denied all the charges. In March, the police received an unexpected confession from Richie. He mentioned that he had no criminal record and a good background, claiming he wasn't guilty of the crime. However, he was willing to talk about who was actually involved in Angela's death. According to him, during one of their meetings, Christopher proposed an unusual deal. Richie recounted that Christopher suspected Angela of cheating and was convinced she was seeing her lover while he worked night shifts. Christopher suggested catching Angela in the act, which would also give Richie leverage in a custody battle for the children. Richie agreed, and that evening, he called Christopher to pick him up from work. Richie explained that he and Christopher went to Angela's house to confront her and her lover. When they entered the bedroom, they only found Angela, who was sleeping peacefully. Despite this, Christopher unexpectedly drew a knife they had brought for self-defense and attacked her, stabbing her multiple times. Angela woke up and tried to defend herself, but she couldn't. Richie confessed that he was in shock, but he unable to help her. Richie watched the attack, but was too stunned and unable to intervene. Afterward, Christopher warned him not to tell anyone, threatening to kill him if he did. Once Richie regained his senses, he checked Angela's pulse by touching her neck. Suddenly, Angela made a final attempt to fight back, grabbing him with her hands and scratching him before collapsing once more. Terrified by Christopher's warning, fled the scene and remained silent until the situation directly affected him. Richie said he did not tell this story during his first meeting with the police because he was scared. He stated that Christopher kept threatening him and his family, but no one believed this claim Richie's. The police reviewed the store's surveillance footage and confirmed that Christopher was working the night shift during Angela's death. He was on Marta Street, visible to cameras from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and couldn't leave his job. Moreover, Christopher confirmed that he took a taxi home in the morning, and this information was recorded on his mobile phone. Once Richie realized how absurd his story sounded, he began telling more incredible tales. He finally claimed to have witnessed Angela being murdered by a killer wearing a black mask, allegedly hired by an enemy of Angela. He even tried to accuse some of his fellow inmates of attacking Angela, but he couldn't clearly explain the incident of that night. He claimed the killers were overwhelmed with guilt and confessed to him during a private conversation. However, all of this turned out to be fabricated. It was revealed that Richie even paid $500,000 to a prisoner to plead guilty on his behalf. When no one agreed to take the blame, Richie attempted to pay a similar amount to arrange for the murder of Christopher to keep him silent. Fortunately, his fellow inmate ignored this offer. One night, while Richie was in custody awaiting trial, correctional officers noticed him acting suspiciously. After searching his cell, they found a broom handle sharpened on one end like a spear. It was clear he was planning an escape and had made a weapon for this purpose. Fortunately, The plan was discovered in time, and the guards began to watch him more closely. As a result, he was never able to carry out any of his plans. Richie's behavior in prison was considered during his trial, and in addition to the murder charges, he faced punishment for attempting to escape. The trial for Angela Wilder's murder began in December 2016. Despite having enough evidence to convict Richie, forensic experts presented the accusations. Angela's body was found on the morning of November 14, 2015. She was lying face up on the bed, covered in blood. A drop of blood found in Richie's car matched the DNA of Angela. Additionally, DNA under her fingernails matched Richie's, providing irrefutable evidence of his guilt. Although Richie's lawyer tried his best to defend his client, the case documents provided by the prosecutor's office were too convincing. Consequently, the jury found Richie Wilder guilty of premeditated murder. A woman who knew Richie well insisted from the start that the police had made a mistake. She argued that they only focused on Richie due to past conflicts, overlooking other possibilities. She maintained that Richie couldn't be guilty because he had spent the night with her from November 13th to 14th. She believes that he is a trustworthy person who loves children and does not commit domestic violence. However, evidence clearly confirmed his guilt. Richie Wilder received a life sentence in prison without the chance of parole and an extra 5 years for trying to escape. Overnight, Angela's children lost both parents. Richie's new wife, Cynthia, who had hoped for a happy family, could no longer be with her husband. After the trial, Cynthia expressed her disbelief, considering it an injustice. She insisted that Richie was wrongly framed and imprisoned. The case might have ended there, but a friend of Cynthia's kept an eye out. Cynthia frequently talked to this friend after Richie was imprisoned, often steering the conversation towards Angela's murder and the prison situation. During one discussion, Cynthia mentioned that Angela was supposed to be shot with a gun her husband had. But he changed his mind and used a knife instead. This raised suspicions for Cynthia's friend. It seemed that Cynthia felt no pity at all, and at the same time she knew more than she was letting on about the murder. The police asked this friend of Cynthia's to let them wiretap his chat meeting next with Cynthia, and he agreed. Later, during a heartfelt conversation, he asked why Cynthia was so upset about the crime involving Angela. She clarified that it wasn't the crime itself that bothered her, but the fact that Richie was caught and imprisoned. Cynthia expressed frustration that Richie should have taken more drastic actions like cutting off Angela's fingers, burning down her house, or destroying all evidence to avoid arrest. Cynthia was also angry about a drop of blood the police found inside Richie's car. She confessed that they had worked together to clean up the traces. Cynthia often discusses the importance of committing crimes perfectly, so as to never get caught by the police. Cynthia admitted that the murder of Angela had been planned by both she and Richie for a long time. Richie did not want to share custody of the children with Angela's and saw the crime as the only solution. Cynthia helped him plan it but did not participate in the attack itself. Later, this recording was given to the police. Cynthia was arrested in 2018, and the trial began. She claimed that everything on the recording was a lie and that she was set up. According to Angela, she wanted to impress a friend because she hoped to start a relationship with him, so she thought this story would make a strong impression. Law enforcement officials stated that Cynthia was the only person who knew the situation and had the ability to prevent the murder, but she chose not to act. The prosecutor's office offered Cynthia's a plea deal for a reduced sentence of 25 years, which she declined. She believed she could avoid responsibility due to the lack of evidence apart from a confession. She maintained her innocence regarding. However, a recording revealed that Cynthia actively participated in planning and preparing for the massacre. She also assisted in disposing of evidence, overseeing the murder, and even attempted to help Richie escape from prison in 2016. Authorities documented these activities and planned to file new charges against her. Cynthia was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and attempting to escape, resulting in a life sentence without parole, similar to Richie, who was already serving a sentence. Both Richie and Cynthia appealed their convictions, but their appeals were denied. After the trials, Angela's mother became the legal guardian of the children. The children moved to Jacksonville, Florida, to live with her in September 2017. The court initially ruled that Richie could not have contact with his children. However, this decision was later revised, allowing the children to decide on contact once they reach adulthood. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jennifer Ertman v. Elizabeth Pena. Jennifer Ertman was born on August 15, 1978, and Elizabeth Pena was born on June 21, 1977. They live in Houston, Texas, and are both high school students. They have been best friends since childhood, sharing a strong bond. Elizabeth's father later commented that Jennifer was a wonderful person, with her positive, caring, and intelligent nature. Both girls had high expectations for them from their parents. They loved fashion, enjoyed jewelry and makeup, and were active, often playing basketball together. Jennifer and Elizabeth enjoyed a vibrant teenage life filled with friends, goals, and dreams. They spent all their free time together, hanging out with the same groups and attending the same parties. On June 24, 1993, they were headed to a pool party at the home of their friend Gina, as they often did. The two girls planned to meet at Elizabeth's house. Elizabeth was 16 years old, while Jennifer was 14. Jennifer's father, Randy, drove her to Elizabeth's house around 4:45 p.m. They dressed up together in preparation for the party before making their way to Gina's. Elizabeth's mother drove the girls to the party at 8 p.m. Their curfew was 11:30 p.m. They were responsible teenagers who respected this rule and planned to be home on time that night, having promised their parents that they would not be late. However, as the evening progressed, Jennifer and Elizabeth became so engrossed in their fun that they lost track of time. By 2 a.m., they realized they would be late for curfew and hurried out of Gina's house. The girls had two ways to get home. The first option was to take their usual route, which went through a busy street. Although it was late, this was the safest choice, even though it took longer. The second option was to cut through the local park and walk along the train tracks, which would save them 10 to 15 minutes. At that time, cell phones were not common. The girls did not have phones, so they could not contact their families to let them know they were on their way home. In addition, people were generally less aware of crime at that time. The girls and their parents did not think about the dangers. People often left their doors unlocked because they trusted each other. Without considering the risks, the Elizabeth, Jennifer chose the shorter route to get home faster. This meant walking through dark park alleys and crossing the railway embankment before reaching Elizabeth's house. Unfortunately, this decision had tragic consequences. Jennifer's mother woke up around 4 a.m. and noticed that the light in her daughter's bedroom was still on, which was unusual because Jennifer always turned it off at night. Concerned, she checked Jennifer's room and found it empty, which worried her even more. To avoid causing panic, she tried calling the parents of Jennifer's best friend, Elizabeth, thinking that Jennifer might have spent the night there. Unfortunately, she couldn't reach them. Concerned about their daughter, Jennifer's parents tried to contact Gina, where the girls had stayed the night before, to see if they had stayed overnight at her house. However, they were unable to contact her either as no one answered the phone at Gina's house. They decided to start looking for the girls. First, they went to Elizabeth's house, but no one answered the door. Then Jennifer's father went to Gina's house and talked to her. He was surprised to find that the girls were not there either. Gina told him that Jennifer and Elizabeth had left her house around 2 a.m. and she had not seen them since. The man returned to Elizabeth's house and discovered that her parents had not seen her since the evening. In a state of panic, the family called 911 to report both girls missing. In response, the police immediately began searching for the two girls, as they had gone missing after dark and no one knew where they were. The idea that the girls might have run away was not considered. All their belongings and money were still at home, and they had no reason to make such a drastic choice. Both girls came from good families. The parents wasted no time. They not only searched for their daughters but also printed flyers with their photos to distribute throughout the city. Family members canvassed the area, asking anyone they met if they had seen the two girls out at night. Unfortunately, no one had noticed anything unusual for 4 days. There was a tense silence, and no progress was. The police received some tips, but these did not lead anywhere. The crucial 48-hour window had passed, despite the family's hopes for the safe return of their daughters. Police feared the worst. On the 4th day after the teenagers' disappearance, the police station received a troubling call. An anonymous caller claimed that the bodies of Jennifer and Elizabeth were in a clearing in the forest behind the park where they had taken a shortcut. The police quickly arrived on the scene and began searching the area as the exact location was unclear. They crossed a railway embankment and from a distance spotted suspicious objects in a small clearing surrounded by trees. As they approached, they were horrified to discover that the objects were two bodies, lying side by side. Both bodies were lying on their backs, naked, and had decomposed significantly due to the summer heat. The condition of the victims made identification very difficult. The ground was covered with numerous fresh footprints, indicating that several people were involved. There were signs of dragging and a struggle, but the police underestimated the brutality of the situation and the horrors the girls endured in their final moments. They reached out to the media to share the grim discovery. At that moment, Jennifer's father was giving another interview, appealing to the public for help, when he overheard the shocking news. While authorities worked to identify the bodies, the grieving father quickly drove to the park where the crime occurred. Overcome with grief, he tried to push through police lines. Believing his daughter was among the victims. Officers struggled to restrain him when he demanded to know the victim's hair color. However, officers were unable to provide any information. The bodies were badly decomposed, making identification impossible, but they feared they could be Jennifer and Elizabeth. All the evidence collected was submitted to the medical examiner's office, and the bodies were examined by forensic experts. They determined that the deceased were 18-year-old Jennifer Ertman and 18-year-old Elizabeth Pena. The identification was made using dental records, as heat and insects had caused extensive decomposition within just 4 days. Multiple prints were found at the crime scene, and police determined that the prints belonged to several people. The exact number was difficult to determine because the prints were mixed up. A detailed analysis during the autopsy revealed that both teenagers died from strangulation. At that time, DNA testing was not commonly used, and there was no existing database for comparisons. Additionally, an anonymous witness who had helped locate the bodies appeared to have more information that could be vital for the investigation. The police tracked down the address from which the call was made and promptly went to speak with the informant to advance the investigation. The police arrived at the home of brothers Joe and Peter Cantu, finding only Joe there. He quickly confessed to being the anonymous informant who had called the police. Joe disclosed that his brother Peter and 5 of his friends had violently attacked 2 schoolgirls. The officers conducted a search of the house and discovered several pieces of jewelry that clearly belonged to females. Victims' relatives later confirmed that the jewelry belonged to Elizabeth and Jennifer. They also found traces of DNA belonging to the girls on the items. Based on Joe's information, police were able to piece together the events of the violent incident. Elizabeth and Jennifer were walking through the park after 2 a.m. when they were approached by several members of the gang. The gang ranged in age from 14 to 18, including the oldest members, Jose Medellin, Derek Sean O'Brien, Efren Perez, Venancio Medellin, and Peter Cantu, 18, along with Raul Villarreal, 17, who had just completed his gang initiation. As the two girls walked silently without stopping, Elizabeth was a few steps ahead of Jennifer as they headed towards their destination, just over a kilometer away. Suddenly, Jose Medellin appeared from the shadows. He tried to grab Elizabeth, but she quickly dodged and sped up. However, he was determined and caught up to her, grabbing her by the neck and dragging her towards where his friends were gathered. At that moment, Elizabeth was left alone in the dark park. Hearing Elizabeth's screams, Jennifer decided to help her. This was a grave mistake, as she was unable to escape and call the police in time. Jennifer ran after Elizabeth and fell into the hands of a dangerous group. Jennifer probably underestimated the situation and did not realize that Jose was part of a group of 6. She was caught and thrown to the ground next to Elizabeth, and then the group of criminals forced both girls to strip and attack them together for an hour. Forensic experts discovered that the schoolgirls fought back fiercely despite the terrifying situation. They scratched, bit, and kicked their attackers. Later, police found evidence of the girls' resistance, including bite marks and scratches on the assailants. Unfortunately, this bravery did not save them. After the brutal assault, the gang leader, 18-year-old Peter Cantu, decided not to let the schoolgirls go, fearing they would identify him and report him to the police. He ordered the others to kill Elizabeth and Jennifer. One gang member, Raul, forced Jennifer to kneel. Exhausted, she complied, and he and Derek placed a red belt around her neck. They strangled her with all their strength until the belt broke, and she stopped moving. Unsatisfied, they continued to strangle her with shoelaces to ensure she was dead. Elizabeth was forced to witness this horrific scene and realized her own fate was sealed. Desperate, she pleaded with her attackers to let her go, promising not to report them. However, the criminals remained unyielding. The exhausted and injured girl couldn't run far before her attackers caught her and threw her to the ground. They began kicking her, causing several broken ribs and knocked out teeth. After Peter, Jose, and Derek strangled her with shoelaces, they stepped on the throats of both girls to make sure they couldn't survive. The gang then took the jewelry and money from their bodies. After the attack, the gang members, except for Derek, went to Peter Cantu's house, where his younger brother Joe and his wife, Christina, were present. Christina noticed that the boys returned late at night with blood on their clothes. They appeared tired and nervous, as if they had just been in a fight. When she asked what had happened, the gang members claimed they were just having some fun. Yet, they did not hide their actions. Instead, they recounted the details of the incident to Joe and Christina with a sense of pride, even laughing about it. Jose remarked that if he had a gun, it would have been easier. Joe and his wife were not pleased with the story. However, they chose to handle the situation carefully to avoid escalating tensions. Instead of arguing or making accusations, they listened intently to ensure that the criminals were being truthful. After the gang members split the stolen goods and left, Joe and Christina left alone. Christina shared her anger and fear with her husband over the incident. Having been a victim of gang rape in her youth, the story had a profound impact on her. Christina convinced her husband Joe that they needed to report the criminals to prevent them from committing more crimes. Joe was initially hesitant because he did not want to betray his brother to the police. He was also worried that the rest of the gang would retaliate against them. However, Christina reassured him that he could remain anonymous when contacting the police, which would help protect their identities. On the fourth day after the girls went missing, thanks to Joe's information, the girls' bodies were discovered. Joe informed the police about the case, which confirmed his testimony. Peter took the victim's jewelry and other valuables, including a ring with the letter E that belonged to Elizabeth. In a misguided move, Jose intended to give the ring to his girlfriend, unaware of the seriousness of the situation and how inappropriate the gift was. In addition, the police found a torn red belt in the brothers' home, which matched the only weapon found near the victims' bodies, which was determined to be the murder weapon. On June 29, 1993, police arrested all 6 individuals involved in the brutal murder. When the police approached Derek, Beffron attempted to flee through the back door but was quickly apprehended as he was surrounded. He was charged with double murder with aggravating circumstances. During his arrest, Derek asked if his detention was related to the 2 girls, which led the officers to confirm their initial tip was accurate. At the police station, Derek confessed that he had given Jose the red belt used to strangle Jennifer and mentioned he had kept a piece of the belt for himself. The police also discovered DNA evidence of the murdered girl in their house. Raul, who had joined the gang the night of the murder, was similarly arrested. With substantial evidence, along with the testimonies from the suspects and informants, they were all charged with double murder, rape, and torture. During the hearing, each person involved in the crime was carefully evaluated. The victim's family endured the painful details of the horrific act as they sought the maximum punishment possible under Texas law. Jennifer's father later recounted that when he arrived at the crime scene and discovered the girls' bodies, he saw Derek smile at him, wave, and then walk away. At the time, overwhelmed with panic and shock, he didn't think much of it. Only later did he realize Derek was taunting him about losing his only daughter. Everyone agreed on the guilt of the defendants. As a result, 5 out of the 6 were sentenced to death. The only one who avoided the death penalty was Venancio Medellin. At just 14 years old, he cooperated with the investigation and testified against the other perpetrators, including his brother Jose. Being a minor, Venancio was convicted differently from the others, who were tried as adults. He received a 40-year prison sentence, meaning he could be released when he turns 54. At the end of the trial, another murder surfaced that the accused might have committed. Authorities were informed about dismembered remains, implicating Derek and Efren in the unsolved murder of a girl named Patricia Lopez, who had been raped and tortured to death. Patricia's body was discovered 6 months before the massacre of Jennifer and Elizabeth, also near the forest. The nature of her murder was similar. Police found that 2 attackers had brutally beaten, raped, and mutilated her before disposing of her body. DNA from the victim was collected and analyzed, but the investigation initially failed to identify the culprits due to a lack of matches in the database. However, upon re-examination, male DNA found at the crime scene matched Jose's. Additionally, a beer can was discovered, and Derek's fingerprint was found on it. Despite this evidence, he was never charged with Patricia's murder. Derek later gave a recorded confession, admitting he was present during Patricia's murder but claimed he was too drunk to comprehend the situation and insisted he did not participate in her torture. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him with the massacre, which was considered unnecessary given the severity of the double murder for which he had already received a death sentence. During the trial, much of the questioning focused on the culpability of Raul Villarreal, who had joined the gang that night. Raul's attorneys urged the jury not to compare him to gang leader Peter Cantu in terms of culpability. However, the defense convincingly demonstrated that he did not participate in the madness. He was, however, present at the scene of the crime and did not stop anyone or leave. This case marked a significant moment in the U.S. judicial system, as it was the first time defendants were sentenced to death for such crimes. The shocking nature of the events received extensive media coverage and instilled fear in the local community, prompting many to avoid the area. The families of Elizabeth and Jennifer attended every trial and execution of the criminals involved. Derek, one of the defendants, was executed in July 2006. He was the only one to express remorse before his execution, apologizing to the victims' families and calling it the worst mistake of his life. Jennifer's father, Randy, remained steadfast despite Derek's remorse. Many opponents of the death penalty, including the wealthy, argue that lethal injection is a cruel punishment. However, the victims' parents disagree. Randy expressed his grief after testifying about the torment his daughter endured and her tragic death. Just before Derek's execution, Randy boldly stated that he wished Derek the same pain that Jennifer had gone through. Jose Medellin's execution also sparked international debate. As a Mexican citizen, Jose did not contact his consulate for protection before his trial, despite having that right under the Vienna Convention. That year, the U.S. opted out of mandatory jurisdiction, but Mexico still filed a lawsuit against the U.S. The International Court of Justice ordered a hearing to assess whether Jose's lack of consular support negatively impacted his defense. This situation received significant media attention and involved human rights organizations, which heightened its complexity. In 2005, then-President George W. Bush ordered hearings on the matter. However, the governor of Texas resisted this order and took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, which decided that only the U.S. Congress has the authority to make decisions in such cases. In July 2005, the International Court of Justice intervened by halting Jose's execution and calling for a hearing with the consulate. Despite this, the governor of Texas insisted that they were not obligated to follow the International Court's decision. Opponents of the death penalty protested against the upcoming execution. However, the families of the victims insisted that lethal injection was appropriate for such a brutal crime. It is difficult to believe that the perpetrator was still in prison, and many wondered how the situation would resolve. He likely hoped for a pardon before his execution. On August 5, 2008, the Supreme Court dismissed his final appeal. In the moments leading up to the execution, the governor of Texas decided not to postpone it, despite requests from Mexico and Washington. Jose Medellin was executed 2 years after Derek's death. On August 17, 2010, the Peter Cantu made a final statement before his execution. Following this, the victims' parents expressed their satisfaction with the court's decision and the execution. They also hoped that the other participants in the horrific crime, who avoided lethal injection, would spend their lives in prison while awaiting their sentences. The Supreme Court enacted a law banning the execution of minors, which led to Raul Vellier receiving a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 2029. This tragedy had a profound effect on the entire Houston community. It reminded residents of the ongoing issue of gang violence, similar to past struggles. To honor the memory of the Jennifer and Elizabeth, a memorial was established at the site of the horrific initiation, and another memorial was placed at their school. Randy believed that, regardless of their age, juvenile offenders who committed such heinous acts should never be released. Randy frequently spoke to the media, vowing to fight tirelessly to prevent the release of anyone involved in this brutal crime. He dedicated his life to this cause and remained committed to his promise. Sadly, Randy passed away from lung cancer in 2014 at the age of 61. His efforts significantly influenced the protection of victims' rights, leading to changes in legislation. Thanks to Randy's relentless advocacy, the families of the victims gained more rights in the courtroom. During hearings, Randy was open about his feelings and showed clear hostility towards criminals. His actions drew both support and criticism. Victim families were not allowed to speak in court to share their feelings. However, after this incident, the system became more lenient. In addition, it was forbidden to attend the executions of murderers. Nevertheless, Randy managed to eliminate this restriction, and it was precisely thanks to his persistence that the families of the victims were present at all the lethal injections. He believed this allowed the world to be made a little better. The remaining gang members in prison continue to request parole, hoping for eventual release. Their most recent application was denied. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jamie Bowie. On the evening of Monday, April 16, 1990, Brian Bowie was waiting for his 20-year-old younger sister, Jamie, to come home. Earlier that weekend, she had traveled to Phoenix to visit family and friends, and she was expected to be back in Los Angeles by the start of the work week. Jamie was particularly eager to return because she had her first day of work at a major Hollywood studio the following day, where she would be involved in an important new project. Brian was in their apartment, anticipating celebrating Jamie's upcoming successes. However, as time passed, she still hadn't arrived. He assumed she was just delayed on her journey and decided to go to bed since he needed to wake up early. In the middle of the night, he heard the sound of the door but thought it was Jamie coming back. Feeling exhausted, Brian didn't get up. Instead, he turned over and fell back asleep. Brian woke up in the morning to find that the sun had already risen. He quickly went to check on his sister, Jamie, but she was missing. Brian around the apartment and noticed that some items were out of place, but this didn't give him any clues about what had happened during the night or where Jamie might be now. Since there were no mobile phones at that time, he couldn't find out what had occurred. Brian remembered hearing the sound of the door opening in the middle of the night and thought Jamie had returned, changed her clothes, and left early in the morning before he woke up. However, they had an agreement that she would wake him if she came home late at night or at least in the morning when she got up. For some unknown reason, she hadn't done this. Brian felt confused and speculated that she might have left for some urgent matter. Perhaps she was dealing with car trouble or something related to her new job. Brian needed to prepare for the day, so he started doing his own thing. He left a note for Jamie and headed out. When he returned home that evening, he was terrified to find the note still there and his sister missing. It was concerning because Jamie was about to start her dream job and had been preparing for it. She was usually responsible and would not skip important events without a good reason or letting someone know. What made matters worse was the evidence that someone had been in their apartment while Brian was away. The rooms were disorganized, and items like the stereo system, a suitcase, and some valuables were gone. Brian knew Jamie would never throw things around or take valuables like that. It was clear someone else had entered their home. Scared to be alone, Brian hurried to his nearby friend's house to make a call for help. When the police arrived, Brian explained the situation over the past few days, suspecting that Jamie's disappearance was linked to a burglary. However, the officers dismissed his concerns, viewing it as a typical break-in. They noted the lack of any signs of kidnapping or a struggle, no blood or weapons present. In their view, Jamie was not in the apartment, and they thought any worries Brian had were unfounded. The police created a report about the theft and examined the house. They wanted to ensure that Jamie was not involved in the incident. They reached out to her family in Phoenix. Her relatives confirmed that Jamie had left them on time and since then they have not seen her. The police speculated that she might have encountered problems on her journey, which was about 600 kilometers long. They thought her car might have broken down, and she would return once she resolved any issues. After this, the police left the house. However, Brian felt something was off. He decided to stay with a friend for a while because he didn't feel safe in the apartment. Brian informed their parents about everything that had happened, and they agreed with him that there were suspicious aspects to the case. They feared something bad had happened to Jamie. As a result, their mother contacted the local police in Arizona and filed a missing persons report for Jamie. The police officers quickly began their investigation. News about the disappearance Jamie's was broadcast on the radio across the state, prompting the launch of a nationwide she search. Jamie's mother provided photos and the description of what her daughter was wearing when she went missing: bright pink pants and a light top. In the meantime, Jamie's father, Joe, and Brian printed and distributed flyers featuring her photograph in both cities. They also made flyers showcasing her car, a blue 1978 Volkswagen Beetle convertible. They handed out flyers along the route Jamie was likely to pass when returning home. The efforts of her family were big, they covering hundreds of kilometers along the highway to search for Jamie and her vehicle. The journey from Phoenix to Los Angeles took at least 6 to 7 hours, and they would have traveled west along Highway 10 to cover that distance. The Jamie family decided to split up to drive along the route each day. During their journey, they visited various motels, cafes, and gas stations, speaking to hundreds of people in hopes of finding any clues about Jamie. A large search operation organized by Jamie's relatives drew significant attention from the local community, leading to rumors that she had been kidnapped and that the police were not thoroughly investigating the case. This has caused the police to investigate the case more thoroughly. Detectives eventually suspect a connection between the robbery at Brian's apartment and Jamie's disappearance, as both incidents occurred around the same time. Meanwhile, Jamie's family continues trying to find her. Jamie's mother frequently posted updates and took on the role of an investigator, questioning staff at roadside businesses. Her determination impressed even the police, as it is uncommon for a mother to be so actively involved in a large-scale search for her child. While many parents might struggle to cope in such situations, she remained focused and resolute, desperately seeking her daughter. However, it's hard to imagine the emotional pain she endured throughout this search. Meanwhile, Jamie's brother and father were also involved, doing their best to gather any information about her whereabouts. The situation became increasingly complicated, especially in some wilderness areas that are devoid of people and infrastructure, which posed a danger to Jamie's life. If search teams had found her in those places, it would have been very unfortunate. Time went by without any leads, and it seemed unlikely that Jamie would be found in the desert. However, the efforts of her family eventually paid off. Shortly after the police launched the rescue operation, several motorists who had heard about the missing girl contacted the police. They reported seeing a young woman resembling Jamie in a blue convertible Volkswagen Beetle parked by the side of the road, seemingly having car trouble. Witnesses described a couple of dark-skinned individuals who were helping the girl with her car. They stood beside her. But witnesses did not intervene and did not notice anything suspicious. It's important to mention that Jamie was a strikingly attractive person, and her distinctive car made her stand out. This caught the attention of witnesses, enabling them to provide crucial information quickly. After receiving these leads, detectives went to the location where the witnesses had seen Jamie. There, they met witnesses, who recognized her from the photo, Jamie, and confirmed what they had seen. The witnesses were able to provide investigators with detailed information about what they witnessed. They explained that while resting in a truck parking lot, they saw a girl standing by the roadside. She had exited her car and opened the hood because her engine was smoking. Shortly after, a couple arrived in a red car. The man was driving, and his wife was in the passenger seat. After starting her car again, the girl drove away, and the couple followed closely behind her until they vanished from sight. This incident occurred in the middle of a deserted highway. Initially, witnesses thought nothing of the situation. However, when they learned about the young woman's Jamie disappearance, they began to have doubts. They started to suspect that the couple who had helped the girl might actually be connected to her abduction. Meanwhile, the police intensified their search for Jamie, focusing on the section of the highway where witnesses had seen the events unfold. They concentrated on the central desert area, where there was a higher likelihood of finding someone in distress. Despite searching hundreds of kilometers of road, they found no trace of the blue convertible Jamie's. It seemed to have completely vanished. The situation was much more complex because it occurred during a time without the internet. People didn't have mobile phones, making communication difficult. There were no geotags, GPS tracking, or surveillance cameras available. The police seized their only chance by placing a large poster along the highway featuring a picture of Jamie's and her car. They requested that anyone with helpful information come forward to assist in the search for she. While many individuals quickly contacted the department, unfortunately, most of the calls were from people seeking attention without offering any valuable information. In total, they received about 200 calls, but none of the calls yielded the expected results. Hence, a lot of time is wasted in handling these useless calls. About a month after Jamie was reported missing, a witness working in an orchard contacted the police. He discovered a body in the irrigation system. The police quickly arrived at the scene and found the body of a girl in very poor condition. Her clothing closely resembled what Jamie's relatives described, including bright pink pants and a light top. However, investigators did not rush to identify her. Before waiting for the forensic examination results, the police estimated that the body had been there for about a month. During the search, they also found a spent shotgun shell at the scene, making it impossible to determine the cause of death without an autopsy. The presence of the shell suggested that the girl had been shot, indicating that the orchard was the crime scene. The forensic expert revealed during the autopsy that the victim had been shot twice. It was found that the first shot occurred while the girl was standing on the ground. A gun was aimed at her, leading her to instinctively raise her hand in defense. She likely attempted to flee, but the attacker was quicker. The shot injured her arm and struck her face and head, resulting in a fatal outcome. Following this, she fell into an irrigation channel and was shot in the back. The victim was identified as Jamie Bowie, who had been reported missing. Her body was discovered in an orchard near Indio, California. Investigators realized why Jamie had remained missing for so long. The area is very remote and sparsely populated. The only way to spot something in the irrigation ditch is to come across it directly. It isn't visible from a distance. Additionally, there are very few people around, mostly just wild animals. Everyone was shocked by what happened. Jamie was friendly, beautiful, and full of ambition. Her family and friends adored her, especially her brother, who shared a close with her. Jamie had her whole life ahead of her, so who could be so cruel as to end it? Jamie's brother, Brian, informed investigators that she had always aspired to work in Hollywood, and just days before her untimely death, she had secured a job there. Jamie had recently become a PR manager at a major studio. While the Jamie family was grieving, detectives focused on a key piece of evidence, a blue Volkswagen Beetle convertible that was last seen with Jamie. No one had spotted the car since Jamie was helped to repair it by two unidentified black individuals. The police concentrated on locating this suspicious couple, believing they might be connected to her death. Despite months of fruitless searching, but about a year and a half after Jamie's brutal murder, the case took a new turn. The police station received information about a blue convertible belonging. They confirmed it was indeed the convertible related to the investigation, as the license plates matched those on the wanted list. However, there was one strange detail: the car had been repainted black and appeared to be abandoned. The police thoroughly examined the car but found no clues inside. To identify the driver, they held a press conference to seek help from witnesses through the media. While this approach didn't always yield results, they still hope that this time someone will respond. Eventually, a witness called in, claiming to have seen his neighbor driving the car. This revelation surprised the investigators. They interviewed the witness in detail, and he provided useful information about the neighbor. The police then summoned the neighbor for questioning, which complicated matters further. He revealed that he had stolen the car several months earlier. In exchange for valuable information to aid their investigation, the detectives assured him he would not face theft charges. The man agreed and explained that after stealing the car, he discovered it had electrical issues. He then took it to a repair shop. When the mechanic asked if the car was stolen, he mentioned seeing a similar car owned by someone else with similar electrical problems. Fearing exposure, the thief decided to abandon the convertible. He repainted it black and moved it away from his home. He provided the police with the address of the repair shop, where they learned who had previously contacted the mechanic about a problematic car. The detectives tracked down the owner of the shop where the convertible was stolen. During their meeting, the owner revealed that he had purchased the convertible from a black couple who arrived in a red Volkswagen. This couple had previously assisted a girl with car repairs and then sold her vehicle, indicating they were aware of Jamie's situation. The investigators intensified their questioning of the shop owner to gather more information about the couple. He provided a crucial lead. He had a sales contract for the vehicle, dated just one day after Jamie was reported missing. The document included the seller's signature, and suddenly, the case that had been cold for over a year began to progress rapidly. The sales contract listed a man named Billy Ray Rakes. At the time of the sale, he was 45 years old and lived in the Los Angeles area with his 28-year-old wife, Hilda. Detectives looked into Billy's background and discovered he had a violent criminal history. He was notorious for having killed his own brother during a fight. His criminal activities began in the 1970s when he vandalized a police office in Compton. He had a history of stealing Kwanzaa cars, which no longer seemed coincidental. Billy was a dangerous individual capable of brutal acts, and Jamie's chance meet with him led to her tragic fate. When detectives arrived at the couple's home, they were not there, they had already fled. The police sought assistance from the media and labeled the couple, believed to be African American, as fugitives. Once this information was made public, it became apparent that the couple had more enemies than allies. The police station received a flood of calls with tips about their whereabouts and activities. It was revealed that Billy had a plane ticket to the Turks and Caicos Islands, a former British colony in the Caribbean. He was still in the city due to difficulties obtaining a passport. Authorities discovered the suspect's hiding place and, based on the tips, set up an ambush in a parking lot, capturing them as they approached their home. After the arrest, the police decision was made to separate Hilda and Billy to compare their statements and extract a confession. Hilda and Billy were taken to a citrus garden in Indio in different cars. During this time, Hilda was extremely anxious, nearing a nervous breakdown. She was also not given any information by the police, which heightened her fear. This worked in favor of the investigation, as a person in such a distressed state is more likely to divulge information. Which is exactly what happened during the interrogation. In the interrogation room, Hilda recounted the story about Jamie's disappearance, but now included more gruesome details. She claimed that they encountered Jamie on Highway 10. Jamie's car had broken down and was experiencing engine troubles. Billy offered assistance, managed to start the car, but warned Jamie that she needed to get to a service station urgently. They suggested Jamie follow they to the nearest place where her car could be repaired or to the city where she would be safe. Jamie agreed and placed her trust in the strangers, Hilda and Billy. After reaching the nearest settlement, Jamie invited the couple Hilda and Billy to dinner at a restaurant. She felt very thankful and even promised that after she received her first wages from her new job, she would pay Billy for his help. Jamie seemed to trust the couple completely, which they took advantage of. First, Billy told Hilda that he planned to steal a car from Jamie, as he usually did. Hilda agreed because she knew it was safer not to oppose him. However, things escalated. He intended to use a shotgun. Hilda had no idea that her husband was planning to kill Jamie. She later admitted that she only realized the plot involved Jamie's death while they were at the restaurant, where Jamie was treating them. When Jamie got up to go to the restroom, Billy revealed his intentions and discussed with Hilda how they would harm Jamie. After that, Jamie drove away in her car, with Hilda and Billy following her. Eventually, they stopped Jamie's car and kidnapped her. They attempted to use her bank card at an ATM 100 kilometers from Los Angeles and later went to a bank in India, but found no money in her account. Hilda initially wanted to talk Billy out of this plan, but eventually gave up as she became frightened for her own safety. In their relationship, Hilda was clearly submissive. Her husband, Billy, dominated her and he likely would not hesitate to use physical force to assert his control. According to Hilda, Billy ordered Jamie to follow him into the dangerous desert, and Jamie complied. Moments later, Hilda heard 2 gunshots. Only Billy returned to the car. Hilda wasn't sure what he had done to Jamie, but she was certain that Jamie was no longer alive. Despite her fears, she remained silent and didn't ask Billy anything. However, Billy's plans didn't end there. He intended to rob Jamie's apartment. He kept her keys and took her driver's license, which helped him discover her address. While Jamie's brother, Brian, was asleep in the apartment, Billy broke in. But he did not know about this. He was solely focused on stealing valuables. After grabbing what he needed, Billy left the apartment. If Jamie's brother had woken up during the robbery, he might have suffered the same fate as Jamie. Fortunately, he remained asleep throughout the ordeal. However, Billy did not stop there. He returned to the apartment during the day to retrieve more valuables. When the police searched the apartment he shared with Hilda, they found some of these stolen items. Additional stolen goods were found at a pawn shop in Denver, where Billy admitted they had sold them for $2,000. They were looking to make quick cash, which is why they sold the car for such a low price. During his interrogation, Billy tried to shift the blame to his wife, Hilda, for the crime, but his account contradicted all the evidence that had already been found. The police were clear about who was responsible for the brutal murder. Moreover, Billy's criminal history made it even more apparent. In the end, the prosecutor's office offered Hilda a plea bargain, requiring her to give incriminating testimony against her husband, Billy. Under state law, the penalty for his crime was death, so Hilda agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. She admitted to being guilty of murder, even though she did not actually pull the trigger. Despite having the chance, she did not warn Jamie about the impending danger. As a result, Hilda received a life sentence but was eligible for parole after 25 years. During the trial, which began in 1994, Hilda testified against Billy. The prosecution faced a big challenge due to the lack of physical evidence. At that time, DNA testing was not widely available, and there were no other technologies to provide crucial evidence. Billy also sought a deal with the prosecution but was denied. Subsequently, he attempted to claim insanity to avoid responsibility for his violent actions, but this strategy failed. Billy Ray Riggs never admitted to being involved in the death of Jamie Bowie. The jury carefully reviewed the case materials before finding him guilty of premeditated murder. He faced the death penalty, which he feared greatly. The jury unanimously supported this decision because of Billy's cruel treatment of Jamie. He robbed her of her future. The verdict is crucial for Jamie's family, who are trying to get over her tragic death. They believe Jamie fell victim to her own naivety, she having trusted strangers too much, which ultimately cost her life. Hilda Riggs was released from prison in November 2014. Her husband, Billy Ray Riggs, has submitted several appeals, but all of them have been denied. He is currently on death row, waiting for his execution. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Lee Matthews. Lee Matthews was born in 1983 to Rob and Sharon Matthews. Rob was the director of a specialized IT technology company and a prominent businessman in South Africa. In 1999, he began working with the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, one of the largest stock exchanges in the world, and a leading IT company in South Africa. Lee had a close relationship with both of her parents, particularly her mother. They enjoyed activities together, such as going to the gym, visiting beauty salons, and shopping. They especially enjoy scrapbooking and enjoy making and designing photo albums. Lee was a compassionate and sensitive individual. Following the tragic Columbine massacre, she joined her classmates in sending aid to the victims, showcasing her empathetic nature. During high school, Lee volunteered at an animal cruelty prevention center, further demonstrating her kindness. Friends described her as quiet and modest, often joking about her shyness and how easily she could blush. After graduating, Lee chose to pursue a career in finance, inspired by her father's work. On July 9, 2004, Lee attended classes at the university. She had just turned 21 the day before, on July 8, and celebrated with a dinner at a restaurant with her family and close friends. At the end of the meal, the entire restaurant sang happy birthday to her, which made her so embarrassed that she decided to leave the restaurant. The next day, a birthday party was planned, and after agreeing to meet friends at a club, Lee headed to the university parking lot. Unfortunately, no one saw her again after that. Around noon, Lee's father, Rob Matthews, received a call from her phone. However, it was not Lee on the line. Instead, a man claimed he had kidnapped her. He instructed Rob not to contact the police and demanded a ransom of 350,000 South African rand, approximately $20,000. The kidnapper specified a location south of Johannesburg for delivering the ransom. Rob believed the caller was serious and mentioned that he had successfully carried out similar crimes before. Rob detected a slight accent and believed the kidnapper was from the area. The kidnapper threatened to kill Lee if Rob the ransom was not paid. At one point, the kidnapper gave the phone to Lee, and Rob heard her crying and she pleading for her father to meet the demands of the kidnapper. Then the call ended abruptly. Desperate to save their daughter, Rob and Sharon decided to comply. They brought the money to the designated location and waited for further instructions. Unfortunately, every attempt to call Lee's phone resulted in a message asking them to leave a voicemail. Her phone was turned off, leaving them cut off from both their daughter and the kidnapper and feeling completely hopeless. They chose to contact the police. A dedicated team was formed to find Lee and ensure her safe return while capturing the kidnapper. Investigators highlighted that wealthy individuals like Rob are often targeted for kidnappings in South Africa. Detectives released a photo of Lee, describing her outfit at the time of her abduction: blue jeans, a red top, and a black leather jacket. Sharon made an emotional plea to the kidnapper on national television, asking him to let Lee go and to tell them where they could find her. She expressed how much she wanted her daughter back to return to her old life, emphasizing the importance of giving her the chance to finish her studies and start a career. She begged him to bring Lee back. Friends and family were deeply worried about Lee's safe return home. Her best friend, Giselle Clemson, mentioned that they focused on searching for Lee to manage their anxiety and uncertainty. A website has been set up to collect information about the kidnapping. The Matthews family offered a reward for any information that could help locate Lee's, while investigators enlisted cell phone technology experts to try to track her phone. As days went by, Lee's parents grew increasingly desperate. They spent hours searching the streets for their daughter. In their anguish, Sharon consulted a psychic who claimed she could see something and directed police to an area outside Johannesburg. However, she later stated that she could no longer see anything. Rob and Sharon considered the possibility that the kidnapping might be linked to Rob's work activities. Detectives advised Rob to stop engaging with the media to help ease tensions. Meanwhile, there are growing concerns that the crime could spur other criminals to carry out similar kidnappings. The negotiating team observed that kidnappings are fairly common in southern Africa, occurring approximately once a month. In South Africa, such incidents often resemble a business transaction, with abductors seeking quick financial gain from their victims. While exact statistics are not released for security reasons, the number of kidnappings is reported to be quite high. On average, kidnappings in South Africa last about 21 days, with most victims eventually returning home safely after ransom payments are made. Investigators noted that the kidnapper had targeted the victim in advance, following her movements and selecting the right time to abduct her. The Matthews family remained hopeful that Lee will come back safely and believed the kidnapper would make contact regarding the ransom soon. On July 21, 2004, a street sweeper in Grasmere Square discovered the naked body of a young girl. He immediately contacted police, who identified the victim as Lee Matthews. Her body had 3 gunshot wounds and was found bound. The area was quickly sealed off by police, and over 50 officers, including forensic teams, began investigating the crime scene. The medical examiner concluded that Lee had been killed about 4 or 5 days before her body was found. On July 21, 2004, a street sweeper in Grasmere Square discovered the naked body of a young girl. He immediately contacted police, who identified the victim as Lee Matthews. Her body had 3 gunshot wounds and was found bound. The area was quickly sealed off by police. And over 50 officers, including forensic teams, began investigating the crime scene. The medical examiner concluded that Lee had been killed about 4 or 5 days before her body was found, which was a week after her family had paid part of the ransom. Soon after, speculation arose in the community that she was murdered because her family couldn't pay the full ransom amount. However, police dismissed these rumors. The entire nation of South Africa became involved in the search for information about the killer. The case, initially classified as a kidnapping, was updated to a murder investigation, and a manhunt for the perpetrator began. The South African police put together a report based on over 100 interviews and leads. Last month, investigators reached out to other kidnapping victims who had paid ransoms, asking for their help in the investigation. Recent autopsy results provided new information about the murder. Investigators suspect that Lee's body was frozen for several days before her murder scene was staged in the square, indicating she was killed elsewhere. Additionally, it was determined that different parts of Lee's body were decomposing at different rates, which suggests that some part were frozen in a large container of ice. The criminal group's actions were described as a clever calculation to mislead the police. Forensic scientists found a group of bullets near Lee's body, but later confirmed that these bullets did not match the crime scene. There were no developments in the case until early October, when a suspect was arrested. The suspect, 24 years old Donovan Moodley, was a student at the same university as Lee. Before his arrest, Donovan confessed to the murder to several friends, and one of them reported this to the police. Donovan's fingerprint matched one found on the tape used to bind Lee's hands, and his phone was tracked alongside Lee's after the kidnapping. After Donovan's arrest, more information about the case came to light. Initially, it was said that Lee's family didn't call the police until they lost contact with the kidnapper. However, this was a mistake. They actually contacted the police right away, and the police went with them to meet the kidnapper, who was hiding in Lee's father's car, Rob. Just minutes before the ransom was to be exchanged, the kidnapper unexpectedly changed the meeting location because he felt the risk of being seen by a police officer was too great, so he left the car. In July of the following year, Donovan pleaded guilty to 3 charges related to Lee's murder. He made this plea shortly before the trial was set to begin. In the Johannesburg High Court, his lawyer read out chilling statements regarding the kidnapping and murder of Lee. The lawyer stated that Donovan killed Lee because he could not find a way to free her without being followed. Donovan admitted that he had been planning to kidnap the girls for over a week, as he thought they were from wealthy families and would likely pay a ransom. He did not specifically target Lee, she was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time while he was searching for a victim. Despite coming from a good family, but Donovan was motivated by greed. The defendant Donovan stated that he approached Lee in the university parking lot that night and asked her for a ride. He then pulled out a gun, forced her to lie on the floor of his car, tied her up, taped her mouth shut, and put a balaclava over her head. Donovan explained that he became worried about police checkpoints and realized he had nowhere to escape. He understood that he could not let her go without facing consequences, so he decided to kill her. He ordered her to strip naked before shooting her in the back of the head. After that, he shot her 3 more times to ensure she was dead, using special bullets designed to explode upon impact, to cause the greatest damage. After the murder, Donovan behaved as if nothing had happened. He gave a ring to his girlfriend and proposed to her, and he even participated in a volleyball tournament. He was later charged with kidnapping and murder. In court, during his confession, Donovan described his actions as disgusting. He admitted to holding her captive for several days prior to killing her. After Donovan's confession, the prosecutor was permitted to present witnesses to show that Donovan did not completely admit to all his crimes, seeking the toughest sentence possible. The prosecutor highlighted that Donovan stated he shot Lee at the location where her body was discovered, but they contended this was untrue. Forensic evidence indicated that the body had been stored in a freezer for several days before being moved to the square. The prosecution also suspected that Donovan may have had an accomplice, and he did not reveal where he had kept Lee or what he had done to her. The medical examiner observed that the condition of Lee's fingers and toes suggested that her body had been in contact with the surfaces of a refrigerator or freezer. Additionally, there were tissue marks on other parts of her body that could have been caused by being wrapped in a blanket. He pointed out that rigor mortis suggested her body had been kept cool, and only 400 milliliters of blood remained in her body. This suggested that she had been murdered and that the blood had been drained elsewhere, as no blood was found at the crime scene. Furthermore, the absence of maggots indicated that her body had not been left at the scene for long and had likely been frozen. It was revealed that Donovan had called his girlfriend near the crime scene, and his phone was found close to the location as well. There was further evidence against him, including a 9mm pistol on him, which was the same weapon used in the murder. During the trial, Lee's father described Donovan as a manipulative coward who did not deserve to live. He emphasized that Donovan's capacity to resume his normal life after the murder demonstrated his ruthlessness. Throughout the trial, Donovan displayed no emotion until his father, Stephen, was called to testify. Stephen felt proud of his son's job promotions, but that pride disappeared in light of the crime. He stated that his son had committed a brutal act and did not deserve forgiveness. Stephen mentioned that Donovan never asked for money from the family, as they were financially stable, which confused him about why his son acted the way he did. He expressed sympathy for the Lee family, saying that they were ashamed to be connected to such a brutal crime and that they took responsibility because he was their son and would always be their son. He added that they could never alleviate this pain and prayed that the Lee family could forgive his son. These words brought Donovan to tears. Donovan has faced many emotional difficulties throughout his life. In 2001, Donovan's grandfather was fatally stabbed by his uncle, who was not convicted of murder. Instead of serving time, the uncle was sent to a psychiatric hospital. The prosecution sought a life sentence for him, while Donovan's lawyer claimed that the uncle felt deep remorse for his actions and did not merit a lighter sentence. The lawyer also stated that the uncle had only pleaded guilty because of overwhelming evidence against him. In the end, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment for murder, equating to 25 years, along with an additional 15 years for kidnapping and 10 years for extortion. During sentencing, the judge described Donovan's crime as extremely brutal, stating it had destroyed his own life and devastated his family's lives. The sentence given to him was among the most severe in South Africa. Following the trial, investigators announced plans to look into whether anyone else was involved in the murder, suspecting that Donovan might have an accomplice. Investigators pointed out that certain parts of the case needed more investigation because of inconsistencies. A few months after his guilty verdict, Donovan notified the Johannesburg High Court of his intention to seek a retrial, claiming he had been framed. In October 2009, he submitted documents to the Supreme Court of Appeal, arguing that he should not spend the rest of his life in prison because he had not intended to kill. He also alleged that the judge who sentenced him was biased due to the media coverage surrounding the case. In interviews, Donovan argued that the incident was manslaughter rather than murder, and he believed he deserved a lighter sentence. He described the life sentences he received as shockingly inappropriate. His new lawyer supported this view, stating that the prosecution had failed to prove that the murder was premeditated. Ultimately, the court denied Donovan's motion, and his conviction was upheld. He remained silent for a while until July 2011, when he appealed to the Supreme Court for a retrial. In his appeal, he claimed that 3 drug dealers named Frank A. Lee and Jumbo had coerced him into participating in the kidnapping by threatening to harm his family, and that is the motive of crime. Donovan stated that the plan had changed, and they were going to kidnap someone else. He was supposed to wait in the car for Lee to come down the stairs. However, A. Lee followed Lee to the car and grabbed her. She was not their original target, but they decided to kidnap her when they spotted her in the university parking lot. Donovan mentioned that he was instructed to go with Frank to dispose of Lee's car near the campus. They were then to meet A. Lee and Jumbo. Frank used Lee's phone to call Rob and demanded a ransom. After the money was delivered, Donovan said he was forced to witness Jumbo shoot Lee. Donovan expressed his fear that drug dealers would kill him, and he pleaded for his life. Allegedly, Jumbo placed Donovan's clothes in his car and instructed him to dispose of a body at home, which resulted in his fingerprints being found on the tape used to bind Lee's hands. Donovan claimed he was so confused that he never reported Frank A. Lee and Jumbo to the police. He accused investigators of fabricating evidence against him and turning the media against him. Ironically, during his last appeal, Donovan confessed to the murder. His petition was denied, but he filed it again the following year. In this appeal, Donovan compared himself to Jesus Christ on the cross, portrayed himself as a victim of circumstances, and complained about being denied legal assistance. He insisted that his confession was false and coerced, but this appeal was also rejected. The kidnapping and murder of Lee Matthews has deeply saddened people all over South Africa. Sadly, the trial of Donovan did not alleviate the suffering of Lee's parents. During the intense trial, Lee's mother expressed that Donovan had shattered their family with his actions. She shared that every night before going to bed, they still visit Lee's room, wishing to find her there, unharmed, smiling, safe, and at home.